whoosh, 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 whoosh. We're live with Dave Kluge. I'm going full nerd. Look at this. Hey guys. Hey Dave. Hey, we're going to talk some fantasy football with you today.
I didn't know I was supposed to wear a collar today. I didn't realize the show had a dress code. I'm here in my. I'll save the shirt for a little bit later in the show. How about that? I'll show you what I'm wearing a bit later.
Nice. Normally it's me with a graphic T-shirt, backwards hat, super cool guy. But I had I had a meeting today. I had a meeting and I had to put on a collared shirt, feel good about it. I'm not going to wear a meeting someone for the first time. I'm not gonna wear my backwards hat. I'm gonna step it up a little bit. And these are my glasses. These are now cool. I got these way before these are like 10-year-old frames. My wife was laughing at me. She's like, "You look such a jerk. Who are you trying to be? Like a dad from the 80s." And I was like, I don't know. I kind of like these. These are kind of good. And then lo and behold, a decade later, they become trendy. My daughter's like, "I can't believe you had those glasses and now they're trendy." I'm like, that's your dad. That's your dad. Super trendy guy.
Fashion,
That's
right?
me. That's me.
It's cyclical. Like I feel like all the things that I was wearing in like junior high and high school, I see junior highers and high schoolers wearing again now. Like the bootleg jeans and the girls with like the layered shirts and the camis and like all like the butterfly clips. My wife told me that butterfly clips are a thing again now. I don't know if remember those hair clips, but it's like every 20 years the same stuff. The bell bottoms in the 70s, bootleg jeans in the early 2000s, and now apparently they're making a comeback again. I wouldn't know. I live in gym shorts.
Do you think the shorts that they used to wear down past their knees are ever going to make a comeback?
I hope not. I mean,
that was the Fab Five, right? Michigan took it to the furthest extent of the baggy tank top jersey with the baggiest possible jeans. Almost you couldn't see any leg. That's how long those shorts were.
Yeah, like when they try going between the legs, like I always wondered how it just didn't get caught in like the crotch of the shorts because it's hanging down to their knees. Yeah.
I actually like the shorts shorter.
I want Jinkos to make a comeback. Do you remember those? Like the huge jeans from the 90s. I'm waiting for those to make a comeback.
Oh, yes, because there was my daughter got into a Notorious B.I.G., and I was like, some of these songs aren't appropriate. You can't be playing this with like your friends and stuff. That's not cool. And then she's showing me some photos. She's like, look how cool he was with the Kangol hat. I was like, that's amazing. And then I was like, look at those jeans. Those were he might have had the biggest jeans of all time.
There was a denim shortage in the 90s because there were like 8 pairs worth of jeans consolidated into one pair of jeans.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yes, I'm all about it. I do like the shorter shorts though, because I'm a runner now, and I have to like roll my shorts up a little bit, just because it feels better. And my daughter's like, "Why are you rolling your? That's so. Who do you think you are? You think you're an Olympian?" Your legs aren't even like muscular. What are you even doing? And I'm like, because she's a tween. It's like, this is where we're at. I was like, you were just complimenting my glasses. And she always has an opinion. Can you believe that my daughter is constantly spouting opinions? Can you believe that?
Who'd have thunk it?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's not what kids are supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I don't. Where did she get that from? Where did she learn that behavior? That is just frustrating. Always with the opinions. I don't know what the hell. Some influence at some point. I don't know if she was hearing something in the background all the time through her childhood. I don't know. Can't figure it out, Dave.
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't run in the family whatsoever.
No, not at all. No, I'm not. Yeah, my wife and my daughter, just constant credit. But no, the thing is, they will give me a compliment when it's deserved, rarely. So that's the thing. Like, I endure it. I endure the constant criticism because sometimes they'll compliment my glasses once in a while, and that's all I need. Just give me a little taste. Yeah, I'll take the abuse. Just give me a little taste. I want to. Yes, it's a trade off. 10-1 ratio. I'm happy there. I'm happy.
Guys don't get compliments often, and when you do,
No!
you remember it for like years. Like anytime I get a compliment from a stranger on anything, it is embedded in my head for years. Be more giving with the compliments because we remember them and we cherish them.
I don't care. Like I said, I just a crumb satiates me. I'm fine. Just a crumb. So we got to bring you in. We got a lot to talk about today. In the chat, apparently Jameson Williams has just gone down in practice with a serious hamstring injury. So we'll have to talk about it. He's on the show sheet, shockingly. There are certain players that you all know are going to be on every show sheet. Rachaad White's on every show sheet. Quentin Johnston's on every show sheet. Jameson Williams is on every show sheet. Roschon Johnson's on every show sheet. There's just few. And then I also know you're a Bears fan, so I was like, oh, we're going to talk Justin Fields and DJ Moore. It's just, and then you were like, I would like to talk about these guys. And I'm like, well, let me tell you, Dave, I got some news for you, buddy. We'll do breaking news. Breaking news, Dave. We actually have all of those guys already on the show sheet. They're already there. Of course, we're talking about DJ Moore. Why wouldn't we? Of course, we're going to talk about all these guys. Yes, DJ Moore is great at football, and that matters. Other guys are great at football that we know, and that matters. Amon-Ra St Brown, also injured, apparently, and not as serious. This is early reports that we're getting.
J-Mo went straight to the locker room, and Amon-Ra went to the sideline to work out with trainers. So that's the only information we really have so far. J-Mo in the locker room, Amon-Ra working with trainers on the sideline. So seems like it's much more serious for Jameson Williams, but we'll have to wait and see.
When you take care of your body at the level that Amon-Ra does, it's certainly an ACL tear is possible. But those types of players I've found through years and years and years of doing this, they suffer fewer of the soft tissue injuries just because they're constantly working out, they're constantly stretching, they're constantly hydrating. They treat their bodies like temples, and they don't have the best example. So Amon-Ra is the pinnacle on this side, like in my life doing this. And on the other side, 4th round pick that has turned himself into Jerry Rice. And then on the other side, you have Devontae Parker, who looked like an Adonis. He looked like a Greek statue of a wide receiver that Michelangelo would have dreamed up, right? But he admitted to only eating candy.
I mean, DK Metcalf. Did you see that? DK Metcalf just said the same thing. He lives on coffee and gummy candy.
Jesus
and he said that's
Christ.
it. He skips breakfast, he skips lunch, and then he said he Grubhubs gummy candy every single night for dinner. And it's like, if I got an NFL payday, like if I had that sort of money, the first thing I'm doing is hiring a personal chef. I am eating 3 balanced meals a day. That is the best investment I think you can make. And especially if you're an NFL player, you hear about LeBron James, he says he spends like $5 million a year on his body with cryotherapy and stretching and personal trainers and nutritionists and personal chefs. That's what you should be doing if you're a pro athlete. You shouldn't be sitting on the couch eating Skittles and gummy lifesavers. That blows my mind that he is willing to potentially throw his career away for a sweet tooth.
Yeah. Devontae Parker technically did have one breakout season. He cracked 1,000 yards one time. And that was the only year that he wasn't suffering with a hamstring injury, a calf injury. We know the Devontae Parker injury history. It was very long. He was constantly missing time in training camp, and then it came out that he doesn't like to stretch, doesn't like to work out, likes to eat chips and candy and fast food. And the funny thing is, some of these guys like a DK Metcalf, they're open about it. Like they're not even hiding it. They're like, yeah, this is what I eat. I Grubhub Skittles. It's fine. It's what I do. Look at me. I'm as in better shape than 99.9999% of people. And while that is,
if he was hitting these macros, like if he was eating there's still meat on the bone, like literally and figuratively. Like he could be in even better shape than he is. That's what blows my mind. I mean, like I said,
when those hamstring injuries happen, though, you can trace them back. There is a a history of strength and conditioning that can be traced back to these things. So I don't know what happened with Amon-Ra. My guess is with Amon-Ra, it was a twisting of something the wrong way, which is always bad. But no player is immune from, especially in the NFL, with some joint getting twisted the wrong way. I really hope he's okay. I really, 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 really do. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I'll bring you on now. I got to bring you on. No more Devontae Parker Skittles talk, though it's one of my favorite topics. Oh, before we do, I need to make sure that we run. I like the commenters on YouTube because they complain when I don't do the show exactly right. I'm in my, I have a producer, Ross Young, but Ross does not run the board. I run my own soundboard. Okay, Ross is in the chat right now doing a great job. He's helping out on YouTube. But I run my own soundboard. And so sometimes I forget a sound effect or I forget an overlay, whatever it is. But in this case, I did remember to start and this is also because you're a Chicago guy. So this is I'm not going to miss it for you. I'm not going to, we're bringing you in, baby. This is the right way. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, the new host of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Podcast. He's destroying Twitter. He's making tons of money. He's, monetizing himself. He's got more followers than me. He's one of the high-rising stars in this business. Dave Kluge! Talk to me.
Always a pleasure, man. This is my second time on the show. The first time you brought me in like that, I think you almost passed out. I don't know if you remember. It was week 1 last year. You were like red in the face, veins popping out. So I can tell the running and the cardiovascular work you've done has been making a difference, because that was much more energetic and you still are full of life right now. So glad to see it.
I'm seeing stars, but you're right. I do run every day. Yesterday, what I did, this is crazy. Yesterday, packed full of meetings, I found a time when I could run to the gym. My gym has a pool, so I put a backpack on. They call it rucking. You ever heard of rucking?
I have.
Yep. So I put a backpack on, some extra weight in there, my swim gear, etc. Ran a mile to the gym, rucked a mile, right, and then ran through like a golf course and with like hiking boots, and then swam whatever, half an hour, however many miles that is, and then rucked back. That's what I'm doing, man. I'm doing it. I'm doing a thing. To try to get my body to feel better, and I do feel better, and it is the little things, the little extra syllables that you can push out in the middle of a podcast that you weren't able to do. You didn't have the lungs before. I have the lungs now. I'm glad you noticed.
I can see it, man. You're looking good. And, my wife and I, we just recently moved into a larger house, so we've got a little bit of space. And one of the first things I did was set up a home gym, because I've never had the space for a home gym before, and went all out, squat racks and everything. And I've been starting my morning every single day with a hour workout, and it's life-changing. Like, it really is. Like, if you can wake up in the morning, roll out of bed at 6 a.m., get the coffee pot going. As the coffee's brewing, I start stretching, go in, get a cup of coffee, just go rip a workout for an hour, and that's how I start my day. It is life-changing, and everyone should be doing it.
Well, coffee does dehydrate you slightly, so I would recommend working out before the coffee. That's the only tweak I would make to your routine.
I got a coffee and a water sitting in my gym, and I'm going back and forth. I need a little bit of both.
And then you're peeing a lot. That's the trade-off is you're peeing a lot, and that's okay. That is A-okay. So let's talk about it. It just happened. We got to get into it. The chat wants us to talk about it. The Lions wide receiver room was wiped out in practice today. Both starters, Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St Brown, off to the side. Williams carted off with what looks to be a serious hamstring injury. Amon-Ra off to the side. I'm not sure what the injury is. Both players leaving practice. It's not good. Who's behind them on the depth chart is now going to be what everyone's looking up on Player Profiler. It's not good,
Denzel
I can tell you.
Mims,
Thankfully,
Marvin
they
Jones.
just signed Khalif Raymond to an extension, so that was well timed. Marvin Jones is there.
I mean, there's not much. Is this finally Denzel Mims' breakout? Are we going to get it after all these years? No.
I
not.
love the depth charts section of Player Profiler because you can get to see players that you forgot about. Trey Quinn. Trey Quinn from SMU, drafted by Washington. And remember, he was the possession receiver opposite Cortland Sutton at SMU. He's a Lion. He's not going to be anything. Khalif Raymond is going to play. If there's no Jameson Williams in week 1, it's going to be Khalif Raymond out there. He plays that position. You've got Josh Reynolds, the slot flanker. You've got Marvin Jones. He can play all over the formation. Marvin Jones in particular is interesting. He's been available very late in all formats, but any format like best ball or we start a lot of wide receivers. I'm in a bunch of dynasty leagues where we start a lot of wide receivers, and I've been getting a lot of Marvin Jones at the end of the draft because I know, hey, at least for the first, say, 6 weeks, he's going to be out there with St. Brown and Jameson Williams in an up-tempo offense in what could be the highest scoring division in the NFC. It's either going to be the NFC East or the NFC North. So Marvin Jones has been interesting all offseason. I think he just became more interesting.
Yeah, he's been one of my favorite targets late in drafts, largely, especially if we're talking best ball here, that Week 17 matchup in Arlington, indoors, Cowboys against Lions. I expect that to be a barn burner. And I was just talking about this the other day on Twitter, but if you look at the Lions schedule, 12 of their 17 games are indoors. And then of those 5 outdoor games, they are either in Florida, California, warm weather places. They only have one game that's Week 14 in Chicago that looks like it, could be a little bit gross and cold and windy. Anytime you play outdoors in Chicago, it's going to be like that. But I can't get enough of this Detroit Lions offense for that reason. They have a terrible defense. They're going to be in indoor barn burners all season long. The division has terrible defenses as well. This team was one of the most pass-heavy offenses last year. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk about Amon-Ra St Brown. I'm not too concerned, even with the Amon-Ra St Brown injury. Like we said, this guy treats his body like a temple. If anybody's going to bounce back from an injury, it's going to be a guy like Amon-Ra St Brown. Same reason I'm not all that concerned with Cooper Krupp. He puts in so much work and puts in the effort to recover and rest and whatever he has to do. I'm not too worried about these guys. I want as much as I can get of this Lions offense, whether it's Sam Laporta late in drafts, even though he's a rookie tight end, who cares? Whether it's Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think is grossly mispriced right now, going at the end of the 3rd round, just bonkers that you're getting him that late. I want as much of this Lions offense as I can. So even if Marvin Jones creeps into the 16th, 17th round, I'll still be throwing some darts at him.
Denzel Mims is not dead yet. He is a Lion. They got him for a late round pick swap. They got him for nothing. But as a rookie, once upon a time, Denzel Mims had 3 straight games with 8 targets and 100-plus air yards. He had that stretch. Where it looked like it was happening at the end of his rookie year. Stranger things have happened. A guy named Golden Tate broke out in his 4th year in Detroit. So stranger things have happened than Marvin. We'll talk about Marvin Mims later. Denzel Mims. Marvin Mims, much better than Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims is a bust, but he could have weeks in this offense. It's a very low bar to play better and to get the call over Josh Reynolds. That's just a low bar. If there's Amon-Ra, we're assuming he's going to be ready, that he's off to the side with trainers. This may be one of those Rachaad White injury scares where he's back at practice tomorrow, so I don't want to worry anyone too much. But whenever a guy goes off in a cart, whether it's the front seat of the cart, right, or the back seat, or the bed is the worst, right, the back of the bed, you don't want to be back there laying down, oh my God, right? That's the worst. Either way, it's not good, but we're talking about a guy with 8 targets in 3 consecutive games, and in each of those games, 100-plus air yards, and he was productive in college, super athletic, comparable to Kevin White, which is just perfect on player profile. I mean, that's just perfect, right? That he's comparable to Kevin White.
I mean,
he's 25
pretty
years old. These guys, like Josh Reynolds, for example, they have weeks, they have stretches, they have months in year 4 or 5 of their career where they are fantasy relevant. So I believe that he is going to make the roster, and I'm interested to see, how things play out.
Yeah, and we're getting really deep here, talking about Marvin Jones and Denzel Mims and, Khalif Raymond. But if hypothetically Jameson Williams is injured and he's going to miss time, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is injured and he's going to miss time, that just means that I want even more Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta than I'm already drafting. I mean, they're going to be the number 1 and number 2 pass catcher on there. I don't think that, these guys that we're talking about are going to jump the pecking order and become the number 1 guy. I think that we just see even more consolidated targets going to Gibbs and Laporta.
I had Josh Larkey on. You know Larkey, right? Larkey, you, me, we all kind of got to know each other together.
He actually moved out to Denver now. So, we've become more than internet friends. We are real-life friends. We climb mountains together, hang out on the weekends. He comes over, and my wife makes us lunch. We've become great friends over the last few months. Josh is one of my best friends in the industry. Great guy.
Our mutual friend, Josh Larkey, loves Travis Etienne. That's the one guy. Every time someone comes on the show, and I can tell they have an agenda of guys they like, guys they don't like, usually, it's like, you're not going to get me off Amon-Ra. You're not going to get me on Jameson Williams, right? And by the way, with Jameson Williams, everyone in the chat, what are you going to say about Jameson Williams? What are you going to say about Jameson Williams? I wish him all the best. He's a professional football player. I didn't want this for him. I don't want this for anybody. This is terrible, right? The takes are now off to the side. The takes only matter when the guy's healthy. If the guy's not healthy, the takes are null and void. It's like a betting ticket that you get, and for whatever reason, the terms and conditions of the betting ticket were not met, and the game essentially, as far as you're concerned, as far as the sports book concerned, never happened. So as long as Jameson Williams is on a cart, as long as Jameson Williams is out of the, as far as I'm concerned, he never happened. My take about him never happened. Nothing happened. I didn't want it to happen like this. Not like this, Dave. Not like this.
Not like this. Not like this.
Not like that, Dave. We'll come back. When he's healthy, we'll come back and we'll continue talking about him. Until then, it's a cryogenic freeze is where we're at with the Jameson Williams takes. That's what he is. If I had to pick a comp now for Jameson Williams, it's becoming clear that the best comp for him is John Ross. You would agree with that? John Ross, looking at draft capital, looking at size, looking at speed, college production, injury history. You're not going to find a closer comp than John Ross to Jameson Williams, right?
I mean, that is just scary accurate. Yeah, I mean, you can't really push back on that. That's a pretty good one. Yeah, I mean, injuries, the gambling suspension, punching a teammate in practice, more injuries, and then more injuries. I mean, it's concerning. I don't know how you can't. Again, we don't need to pile on right now. The morning after he got injured, but right. Yeah, I mean that bust meter is beep 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 beep. It's beeping loud.
Injuries beget more injuries, and my dubious disposition with Jameson Williams started on draft day. It started on draft day when the Lions drafted him over Treylon Burks.
And traded up for him.
Right. I didn't agree with the pick. I thought that just like going all the way back to John Ross, I wanted it to be Juju. I was like, Juju Smith-Schuster is the best receiver in this class. And I don't understand why he's making it to the second round. Right? And so you have people that believe that Marvin Mims is the best receiver in this class, and they didn't understand how he made it to the end of the second round. Just like you had people thinking that DK Metcalf was the best receiver in his class. They didn't understand how he made it to the end of the second round. This is what happens. Sometimes the guy that you think is the best receiver in the class, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, both second-round picks. That particular year, I didn't think it was Cooper Krupp. That's now well known. Thank you, Steve Smith. I thought it was Juju Smith-Schuster, and The Corey Davis selection was more understandable to me, given how prolific he was in college. The Mike Williams pick was understandable to me because of the Clemson helmet. I was like, okay, they're helmet drafting with Mike Williams. They're going straight up on, raw college production with Corey Davis. That makes sense to me. Nothing made sense about the John Ross pick, right? Nothing made sense. It's like you can always find speed. If you just want raw speed, and that's really what this player is delivering, there's not a lot of other refined skill there. That guy is always available in the form of Calvin Austin in the 4th round in every draft. Darnell Mooney the year before that. That guy's always there, right? Like, why are you drafting Henry Ruggs when you can get Mooney? Why are you drafting Jameson Williams when Calvin Austin is just as fast and he's available much later? That was my original criticism of Jameson Williams, was the pick itself by the Lions. And I thought it was an anomaly that the Lions just got infatuated with speed and that every front office is allowed to do that. And then they came back the following year and revealed themselves to be focused on the wrong details on draft day by selecting a off-ball linebacker and a running back in the 1st round. Then I knew, okay, everyone who's a fan of the Packers and the Vikings and the Bears, who's super terrified of the Lions and what they're building, can breathe a sigh of relief that they're not going to be what they could be if their general manager was in full control, because something happened and Campbell took control of the 1st round. And as soon as you give control of the 1st round to Dan Campbell, you're going to get a middle linebacker named Campbell.
So what I will say, with hindsight on, it's easy to look at Jameson Williams and say that he could be the John Ross, but I think that you're underselling him a little bit for his versatility. When he was in college, he was primarily used as a field stretcher, but I think that he showed abilities to win at other levels of the field as well. I mean, he's not just a burner. We're not talking about Darius Hayward-Bay or John Ross. And we can look at that now and kind of make those comps. But I think that you're underselling what he was a little bit as a prospect. He was a little bit more refined than some of those other guys that we're comping him to now. And I get it. I have changed my tune on Jameson Williams now compared to the day that he was drafted. But I think that the hopes were that he could be a little bit more versatile, that he could win at every level of the field. I don't think that they drafted him just saying, you're running nothing but 9 routes, and that's why we traded up for you. I think there was hope that we saw little flashes in college of him being able to do more than just that.
But you also agree that having an established alpha receiver that is truly versatile, that won down the field and close to the line of scrimmage, and you just bully people like a Treylon Burks, that guy is going to be more valuable as a first-round pick and more worthy of first-round capital than the archetype that is the Jameson Williams archetype. If you are comparing the two types of receivers to select in the 1st round, Completely. Am I right in assuming that you would lean more on the Burks archetype?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Jameson Williams, I can't remember, was it 10th or 11th overall? He should have been like a back end of the 1st round. He wasn't we trade up into the top 12 to get this guy, because there were hopes that he could develop into that receiver. Because he did show it a little bit, but I'm in complete agreement that Jahan Dotson, Treylon Burks, some of the other guys that went in the 1st round probably should have gone ahead of Jameson Williams.
Now, they also drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. And what I find hilarious, this is really, I know that you like Jahmyr Gibbs this year, and we'll get to the dichotomy of drafting Gibbs over Etienne versus Gibbs. I'm getting to that. I started talking about Josh Larkey and Etienne. We're gonna get to that. We have a circuitous route sometimes we take. Okay?
We'll get there.
We have to cover this, because especially as you're a Bears fan and you're terrified of the Lions, and now the Lions are falling apart, and sometimes it's just bad luck. One year, every offensive lineman for the Patriots went down with some lower body injury, shoulder injury, and they lost to the Ravens in the playoffs. They never had a chance because Tom Brady had no time to throw, and it was basically a Super Bowl caliber team that could never get off the ground because of injuries. So it happens sometimes. And with offensive line, there's really nothing you can do, because they're so rare and they're so unavailable in free agency. It's not like you can go to free agency and find a stud tackle. They don't come around, right? Like we're so excited when like a Corey Linsley is available, like a guard or a center, and the Chargers got the best center in free agency, like that, or he's actually the best center that's come available in free agency in years, and they got him. That's a huge win for a team that does that, because you need to do everything you can to maximize your depth at offensive line, because those seasons are out there, right? For the Patriots, they felt it, and they started investing more in the offensive line after that season, because they realized, oh wait, this is not a position that we can just coach them up and patch together. It's not possible. Offensive line is the position in the NFL. You could argue that you're better off getting an injury to your starting quarterback than your top 3 offensive linemen.
And Trent Williams goes down and the 49ers suck. There's no way around it. Like if they lose Trent Williams, that entire offense is not doing what they're doing. And then we saw it last year, the Denver Broncos, their biggest weakness was offensive line. So then when Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers hit free agency and became available, give them $140 million to 2 offensive linemen. They said, we cannot give you guys enough money. Whatever we have to do to get you here in Denver, please, $140 million. Sure, come to Denver. We need you, because those types of guys very rarely hit free agency. Rarely.
And whenever your team bids up and gets those guys, that's almost always a good investment. Even if it doesn't work out, it was good process to spend your money there, not on running back, not on middle linebacker, not on all these other positions that you can always find talent in round 2, 3, 4, 5 of the NFL draft. Which takes me back to the Lions. Had they sequenced their position drafting differently, maybe they draft a Jackson Smith-Njigba this year, and they're fine. They can withstand an injury to their wide receiver core. They can let a DJ Chark go and not bring anyone back to backfill him other than Marvin Jones, right? And they can be fine. Now, if you lose Jameson Williams, this is a huge blow. They do not have depth. We talked about behind him, it is Khalif Raymond and Denzel Mims and Josh Reynolds. And it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way because no one forced you to draft a middle linebacker and no one forced you to draft a running back, especially when the best player available when you were picking was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave have said in no uncertain terms, this guy was the best receiver at Ohio State when we played together. And he also was younger and put up better stats than those guys.
Yeah, and the Seahawks had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Like, they had no need for a receiver, but they said, no way in hell are we passing on this guy. He just was gift wrapped to us in the 20s. How do we not take him? That's how you should be drafting. You shouldn't be saying, oh my God, 12th overall pick, we need Jahmyr Gibbs. Should we trade up for Jahmyr Gibbs? Yeah. Oh my God, maybe he's going to drop to us. Like, it was kind of crazy.
He can play receiver.
He can.
He can play receiver too. We could actually deploy him as a receiver. Hey, Lions. Hey, Dan. Hey, Brad. I got some advice for you. If you need a receiver, draft a receiver. Draft one of the best receivers we've seen in the last 5 years who happens to fall to pick 20. How is that possible? I couldn't believe it. Every year, there's some slide that happens that I just can't believe. Actually, last year or this past year in 2023 in Kansas City, it was Nolan Smith. I couldn't believe a top 10 talent at edge is falling to the end of the first round. And I couldn't believe Jackson Smith-Njigba fell as far as he did. Doesn't make any sense.
Now, we know Jahmyr Gibbs can play receiver, and he played a lot in that first preseason game. He took 18 snaps. Of those 18 snaps, how many times do you think he lined up in the slot?
Tell me.
0.
What?
He can. But they say that he can play in the slot. They say he can play receiver. He took all 18 of his snaps out of the backfield.
So, in fantasy drafts, you're selecting Gibbs over Etienne.
I am.
Why?
The draft capital, and I'm trying not to get too blinded by the draft capital because the Lions seem pretty silly with how they use their draft capital, as we just discussed. But it almost feels like drafting Jahmyr Gibbs was like a middle finger to DeAndre Swift. Like they hated DeAndre Swift. They did not want to give him anything and then traded him away for pennies on the dollar. They gave all of the high value red zone touches to Jamal Williams. The Lions hated DeAndre Swift. And I almost feel like this drafting of Jahmyr Gibbs is almost their way of showing, we want to show you what DeAndre Swift could have been. And they, traded him or took him 12th overall. And if you look historically, over the last 10 years, even if you extend it to the last 15 years, every guy drafted that high has basically had a floor of RB10 and a ceiling of RB1 in their rookie season. So my kind of industry, my macro level take on Jahmyr Gibbs is that if Bijan Robinson wasn't in this draft class, Jahmyr Gibbs would be a lock in like the early second round. But I think that people are just scared. You hear it all the time. Like, Matt, you're on social media. You guys have an Instagram and a Twitter and all that. As soon as you share your rankings, your running back rankings, the first comment almost always is, Bijan Robinson's never taken a snap in the NFL. How can you put him in the top 3? And I think that's just kind of the mindset. Like, even though we know the data says that, like, when people are drafted this high, they're going to get a ton of usage as rookies. People are just scared to draft 2 rookies that high. He's a pound short of what we want to see. Had he just had a rock in his pocket or something when he stepped on the scales at the combine, I don't think there'd be quite as many fears about Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think the weight concerns are a little bit overblown, but we saw, everything that we wanted to see in that first preseason game where he was getting open in the flat. He was catching balls. He had the wiggle in the open space. That's what I expect from Jahmyr Gibbs, is for him to be what we wanted DeAndre Swift to be all these years. And I can tell you as a Bears fan, somebody who has watched David Montgomery up close and personal for years, he's not that good. Like, everybody loves David Montgomery for some reason. He's one of those guys that can kind of do everything okay, but he doesn't do anything exceptional. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is just, in almost every facet of the game, a better running back. And I think that he is going to be the clear RB1 in Detroit.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You believe that Jahmyr Gibbs can put up more than 15 fantasy points a game?
Easily. We're talking PPR? Absolutely.
You know that Christian McCaffrey in his rookie year put up 14.3 fantasy points per game.
Right.
That's the ceiling for a satellite back plus. Players that are 200 pounds that aren't coming into the league as bell cows, as newly minted bell cows out of the box. You take the wrapper off, they're a bell cow. They take more time to ramp up. If this is 2024, I'm in. But in seasonal leagues in 2023, I'm going to see how Jahmyr Gibbs does. I'm going to see how he's used. There's no guarantees on how he's used, what his touch count's going to be, where his touches are going to be. Let's wait a year, see what happens, see how they use him. He's very much like a black box running back where there are so few guys of his size and skill set that go in the first round that we have like a couple examples. And then those couple examples are Christian McCaffrey, 14.3 fantasy points per game. Whereas at Bijan Robinson, it's a lot easier for me to pencil him in for 250 plus touches and project him accordingly. Much more difficult for Jahmyr Gibbs. And my argument for Travis Etienne over Jahmyr Gibbs is, with Travis Etienne, he's like a bigger version of Jahmyr Gibbs. He also has the first round capital. He's also on an ascending offense, but we know he's going to get the touches, especially in the red zone. It's a projection that is much more certain and much less fragile than the Jahmyr Gibbs projection. And the upside case isn't there. You have to draft some Bijan in the first round because he could break fantasy. I don't see that with Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't see that in his range of outcomes. I haven't seen that from a running back with his profile. When I do see it, right? When I do see an unprecedented running back year as a rookie put down, on wax, like what some believe Jahmyr Gibbs is capable of, at that point, I'll start to factor it into my future projections and assumptions about players and their upside. But until I actually see it in real life at some point in the history of the NFL, in the archives, I'm not going to factor it into what is possible.
So I hear these Christian McCaffrey comps all the time. And, Josh Larkey, funny enough, we talk football when we're on hikes. Most people are on hikes, just kind of keep quiet. Josh Larkey and I are climbing mountains, just spitting takes back and forth at each other. And he told me the same thing about Christian McCaffrey and what he did as a rookie and his 14.7 points per game. The Detroit Lions last year had almost 1,500 more yards than that 2017 Carolina Panthers team did. So we're comparing two very different ecosystems. Even if he's getting a similar slice of the pie, that pie in Detroit is so much bigger than what we saw in the 2017 Carolina Panthers team, where obviously Jonathan Stewart was there, but it was a defense first team. They were about a top.
I mean, Jonathan Stewart, David Montgomery. I mean, the parallels are
very
pretty
similar.
good.
They are similar. I'll give you
this
that.
is like Jameson Williams, John Ross level parallel we're getting here.
But you also had Cam Newton, who was taking a lot of the goal line work and a lot of the rushing ability as well. I think that there are going to be plenty more opportunities for Jahmyr Gibbs on the 2023 Lions than there were for Christian McCaffrey on the 2017 Carolina Panthers.
Okay, but you can't have it both ways. I mean, you people that just want to tout the unknown quantity because of the tantalizing upside of the unknown can't have it both ways. You can't tell me Lions are the reason why I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and then talent is the reason why I love Bijan Robinson, because Bijan Robinson is operating in an offense that's much closer to those Carolina Panthers, only worse.
That's fair. The difference is
you cannot talk me into both Bijan on talent and then Gibbs on situation and have it both ways. I think you got to pick one. You either talk me into Bijan in the first round or you talk me into Gibbs at the 2-3 turn. I can't go to both places because the Bijan argument falls apart when we actually dig into the details of the Falcons offense. That's before beat reporters start to project 100+ carries for one Tyler Algier, which is what I saw today.
So, I mean, I'm with you. I am below consensus on Bijan Robinson, but
okay,
I mean,
thank God. Thank you. Okay, so you're
let's
not
just
one of
talk.
these rookie people. You know these rookie people. That rookies this year is the 1 year where all the rookies hit, and you can't fade any rookies. You got to be above consensus on every rookie. And my God, you realize that this guy has infinite possibilities. He has no track record in the NFL. He could have 100 catches, right? Christian McCaffrey had a mere 80. Why can't Gibbs in a higher volume offense? If you just extrapolate Christian McCaffrey as a Lion, he'll have 100 catches.
Yeah, and for me, it's not even that.
Yeah.
I mean,
rookies, man, they're so exciting. Oh my God, I want them all.
We can nitpick every single running back in this year's draft class. I mean, not draft class, I should say, like fantasy drafts. There isn't a safe running back out there. I mean, even Christian McCaffrey, like the guy that we are unanimously touting as the RB1 this year. What, he's going to get like 55, 60% of the snaps in San Francisco if we're lucky? Like, running backs just suck this year. Like, I don't want to take any running back. So even though
okay, can we stop there, please?
Yeah.
You can't. Yeah. Please don't bulldoze over that point. That's a very important point you're making, because I've been getting a lot of criticism for drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown at the 103, and this is my point, that I'm not that excited about Christian McCaffrey. I'm sorry, I'm just not. If it were 2019, I'd be more excited. Right? I'm probably most excited about Austin Eckler. I don't know why I'm drafting Christian McCaffrey when I can have Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler's actually in a better situation than even Christian McCaffrey, and he is more explosive at this point in his career, given the he's been healthier and suffered fewer of these lower body injuries, and he's, by the efficiency metrics, actually been just better. So for me, if it's for my life and I'm not drafting to exposures, like based on ADP, which that's the argument for McCaffrey. If you want to get some McCaffrey, you got to draft him before Eckler in some of these situations. Fine, fair. But if this is for my life, if this is like the one draft I'm going to do, and it's for everything, I'm not going to risk a first round pick on a running back, period. Like, I remember, Dave, there was something called Zero RB, and there was this company called RotoViz. They were a media company, and they had a guy named Sean Siegel, and he was very popular, and for years, for a number of years, this might be before your time, but most fantasy analysts were heavily influenced and touting actively the 0 RB strategy. And then a funny thing happened. It actually did well. Their teams did well. The strategy was successful. And for some unknown reason, it's been abandoned just as the NFL is abandoning the running game. Just in time for that, fantasy gamers have soured on 0 RB. It doesn't get the same level of support in the industry. It's not as popular. You don't hear about it as much. There aren't as many articles about it. And I'm like, what did I miss? What happened? Everything that Sean Siegel talked about 10 years ago is happening today. The evolution of the NFL into a pass-first, up-tempo offense is happening. The evolution of the NFL into a specialist backfields from team to team to team to team is happening. The rate of injury for running back is actually rising at a faster rate on a per-touch basis than it is for receivers. So everything that Sean Siegel talked about, the fragility of running back projections, as I mentioned earlier, is now higher than it has been in my life, or at least in my time in this business. And the wide receivers are getting more stable year in, year out. And yet 0 RB is at a low of popularity as far as I can tell. And yet when I'm in the first round, the last thing I want to do is risk it all on a goddamn running back when there are true rare talents on the league's best offenses, from Justin Jefferson through Amon-Ra St. Brown and Stephon Diggs in the first round. The opportunity cost of foregoing those guys is just too high, man.
Yeah, and I just, why draft Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, these guys in the first round when you can get Jahmyr Gibbs and Rhamondre Stevenson and, even Breece Hall if you want to go there, and Travis Etienne and Joe Mixon. I think it's pretty flat between like rounds 1 and rounds 4 with running backs. So I think
all the way out to Rachaad White, I would argue.
I think comparing Rachaad White to CMC is maybe a bit of a stretch, but I get what you're saying. I mean, you can kick your RB1 and RB2 down the board to the 5th, 6th, 7th round and still feel pretty good about who you're starting. Like, I can come out of a draft with Rachaad White, J.K. Dobbins, and Cam Akers as my running back core and feel pretty dang good about it. Not much worse than I'd feel if I had Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, and whoever else is going in round 3. And
with rookies, everyone's about the talent, right? The talent. The talent in Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, and Rachaad White is exceptional. You're not going to get anything close to that relative talent at the wide receiver position. So when we compare the relative talent of Akers, Dobbins, White, their abilities, their all-purpose skill sets in the context of their size and then their roles in their respective offenses. We're talking about primary backs, undisputed primary backs in NFL offenses with all-purpose skill sets, where Rachaad White being the most versatile of the three and Dobbins being the most explosive and Cam Akers somewhere in between. The difference between those guys and the Jonathan Taylors and the Ecklers and the Bijans is certainly there is a disparity, but it's not the widest gap, right? The gap between Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Stephon Diggs and the guys you're drafting in the 6th round at the wide receiver position is absolutely a chasm.
Yeah, and I think that's why people see, why are there only 3 running backs going in round 1? When I was drafting, 10 years ago in my fantasy football league, there were 10 running backs going in the first round. And, they see these running backs falling in drafts. And I was completely victim to it early in the offseason when I said people are crazy for doing this. And I'd start my drafts off with 2 or 3 running backs. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at, Christian Watson as my wide receiver 1, and I'm looking at Gabe Davis as my wide receiver 2. And I'm like, no, I don't want to play this game anymore. This is not fun. I mean, it dries up quickly. So even though, running backs are getting pushed down draft boards, I think 0 running back is as viable a strategy as ever this year.
I mean, whenever I hear people talking about the wide receivers are drafting in round 5, 6, 7, 8, it's like they're squinting. Like it's just a big squint. It's a big squint or a big reach every time. And it's understandable. I get it. Like, I love Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is phenomenal. 6 seasons with 1,000 yards. He had an 1,800-yard season in college. The guy is a field stretcher and a possession receiver. He's phenomenal. And you can get him in the 8th and 9th round. It's a great pick. But the difference between Brandon Cooks and Ja'Marr Chase is enormous. It's incredibly. One guy's 30 years old, and he's an auxiliary receiver, right? And in the back half of his career, the other guy is in his prime and could go for 2,000 yards. Like, they couldn't be more different, and yet the running back disparity, not nearly as much. And I love this guy, Anthony Majika, in the chat. He said, people will latch on to hero RB way before zero RB. Hey, Anthony, I got some breaking news for you, buddy. Want to do some breaking news? I invented hero RB. It's literally a term I came up with. Okay? It was first discussed on these airwaves and written about on playerprofiler.com. So yes, thank you, Anthony. I know all about hero RB, right? Yes, you're right. It was a great strategy 2 years ago. It was an unbelievable strategy. It was my favorite strategy. And even then, that was innovative, right? Now, you can get your hero so
in round
late.
4. You can get Joe Mixon in the 4th round as your hero.
You can get your hero so late, hero has become zero.
Oh, put it on a t-shirt. Put it on a t-shirt, Matt. Sell it. I love it. And it's so true. I mean, like, you don't need to draft that first round guy. You don't need to pay up for Christian McCaffrey to be your hero. You can get Jahmyr Gibbs, who we've talked about, we've dropped his name 100 times on this show already, or you can get Joe Mixon or Travis Etienne, or, the options are endless in rounds 3 and 4 that could be your RB1, and it's not all that different than the running back you're drafting in rounds 1 and 2. I did it yesterday. I started off a draft. I was on a CBS mock, and I started off with Stephon Diggs in the first round, A.J. Brown in the second round, and then Jahmyr Gibbs in round 3. And I think that's like the best way to start your drafts this year. Lock in your 2 elite wide receivers. If you can start with Cooper Krupp and Amon-Ra St Brown, which I did in an underdog draft yesterday.
You did?
I did.
What?
I actually tweeted out, and I said,
at
this
the
is
12,
the best
13?
start. No, I got Cooper Krupp at 6, and then Amon-Ra fell to me at 19. What are people doing? I got Amon-Ra St Brown at 19.
What?
Yeah, people were asleep at the wheel yesterday. And some you usually have to wait for Kupp to slide, but this was that weird Amon-Ra slid into me. But I feel like I'm just getting 2 Cooper Kupps at that price.
Well, he's going to be this year's Cooper Krupp.
Exactly. Alfredo Brown, my co-host over at Football Guys, has been calling Amon-Ra St Brown Sippy Cup. And I said, you can stick with that, because if I ever cross paths with Amon-Ra St Brown, I don't want to get punched in the mouth, but it is a pretty good nickname.
I love it. And another thing is, if you avoid, let's say, I don't know, let me think. Let me pick a round. Round 3 running backs, right? Round 3 running backs. And again, in that zone, I'm going Travis Etienne because he's both safe and he has the upside of being the primary back with an all-purpose skill set in the Jaguars system. So there's sick upside there, but there's also stability in that he's not going to be usurped and his role is not in question. Meanwhile, you have Breece Hall. Suddenly, his role is non-existent, at least early in the season. And then we're going to see what kind of role he can carve out as the season goes along, as the Jets sign Dalvin Cook. So how do you recalibrate your expectations in fantasy of that backfield?
So for this year, if I'm being honest, not really that interested in either. And Breece Hall was very much so a flag plant of mine early in the offseason. Wanted to draft as much of him as I could. I was up to like 23% Breece Hall at one point. And
we have a sound effect for that. We have a sound effect.
Yeah, I bet on the wrong league. Yeah, man. Not feeling good about it. Not feeling good about it at all.
My hands are up. My hands up no more.
But you know, there aren't a ton of edges to be had in fantasy football anymore. But I think one of the edges you can still have is like trying to predict free agency moves and trying to predict transactions and whatever it may be. And as soon as the Jets expressed any interest in Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette or these guys that they were courting, I just removed Breece Hall from my draft board. And I said, I do not want him at his ADP because clearly something isn't right. Now, I think there is still, you can talk me into the argument that Dalvin Cook is going to be there for the early season and he's going to be the 1A and Breece Hall is going to be the 1B. And then it's going to flip flop as the season goes on. And Breece Hall is going to be the 1A down the stretch and help some people win some leagues. I mean, you can talk me into that argument, but if that's the best case scenario that we're hoping for half a year as the 1A behind the sixth worst offensive line in the NFL, that's a tough sell. So I don't really want either of these guys. The good news is for Dynasty, if we're looking at that, if anybody is panic selling Breece Hall, like if I can get Breece Hall for any first, even if it was projected early first, I'm taking that because Dalvin Cook's had a 1-year contract. And, you know, even though he had some big runs last year, he is trending downward fastly and quickly. And next year, he's going to be a 29-year-old back in free agency again. So if I'm buying Breece Hall in Dynasty, but for 2023, man, it's looking bleak.
Can you imagine if the Jets had just drafted Tristan Wirfs? Tristan Wirfs was the chalk pick a few years back, right? And the Jets want to get creative with Mekhi Becton. They're like, this guy's the size, speed, athleticism, specimen, right? He's a rare talent. Like, you don't – it's a tackle, dude. You don't need to hit the maximum upside of a guy of all time, right? You don't need that. That's not what you need. It's nice to hit the max upside on another type of player, let's say an edge rusher. I could see, like an edge rusher, the difference between a guy just pressuring the quarterback and a guy that's a complete nightmare, that can come down to that little extra amount of athleticism that your scouts are saying, yeah, this guy's the real deal. And yeah, he had injuries in college or this and that, but we should take a chance on him. He can be a true difference maker on Sundays as a disruptor. Okay, right? Like push the button on Jadeveon Clowney over like a guy that's a little more meat and potatoes in the draft. I'm all about that. But not...
They did it with Elijah Vera Tucker, too. Another guard.
Not at line. On the line, I want Tristan Wirfs. I want the guy from Iowa who's never been injured, who and it has been a rock his entire college career. That's all you need, right? We had Rashawn Slater was a great example of a guy that slipped into the teens, and it's like, I would have taken him right after Sewell, the pick after Sewell. It should have been Slater. Like that was, I mean, you guys are all insane taking all these unnecessary chances with your offensive line. Doesn't make any sense. Now, the Jets clearly got nervous about Breece Hall's knee because they have a lot of depth behind him. Right? It had to be about Hall because they have Zonovan Knight. They have Michael Carter. They have Israel Abanikanda. So they have plenty of depth behind him. It had to be about Hall. That's the only reason to bring in Dalvin Cook. And I believe that this was passive-aggressive Aaron Rodgers. Because he,
my God, he took the words out of my mouth.
This is what happened. Can I just tell you what happened? This is exactly what happened. Because Aaron Rodgers, he's not going to say anything. He's not going to come out and say anything. Not even internally. I think internally he's also very quiet. I think he's living that life. I don't think that he's a different guy off camera, on camera, in the meeting room, on the field, on the Pat McAfee show. I think he's the same guy. I think, but see that guy, he's going to say stuff like, has Breece Hall, how's he doing? How's his knee doing? How's he practicing? How's he moving around? How's the range of motion and Breece Hall's knee looking? And they're like, Aaron, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. I'll go check with the training staff, and we'll be right back, and we'll get right back to you, Aaron, to see how Breece Hall's doing. No problem. He hates Breece Hall. He's worried about the injury. We got to bring a guy in quick. Aaron's panicking about Breece Hall. That's what happened.
And we know players All you got to do is look at the NFL Top 100 or the players vote. That tells us players suck at evaluating talent. And Aaron Rodgers, I think what happened is he said, hey, go out and give me Alan Lazard. And they did. And he said, ooh. And then he said, go out and give me Randall Cobb. And they did. And then he said, let's see if we can get Dalvin Cook too. And I think that he was just pushing it to see how far he can go because
but let's just for accuracy's sake. Okay, Dave, for accuracy. He didn't just say go get Dalvin Cook. He said, when I was with the Packers, a guy I really respected, he had a game that I thought really could maybe help us here, but maybe not.
Yeah, the Vikings
Dalvin
beat us
Cook,
week 1
he
last year,
seems like a player
27-13.
that he really gave us a lot of trouble when I was on the Packers. Just wanted to say that. I'm gonna go have some tea now.
I think that is spot on. And, I get it from Aaron Rodgers' standpoint because for 5 years, when he was on the sidelines, he was watching Dalvin Cook run all over his terrible Green Bay Packers run defense.
Right.
And then even last year, as soon as last year, Dalvin Cook in week 1 had over 100 scrimmage yards against the Packers when they got beat down and embarrassed in week 1. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers watched the other 16 games where Dalvin Cook, if he wasn't breaking off a long run, was getting knocked over by the first defender. And, Dalvin Cook wasn't that good last year. And I think that people see the fantasy production and they think, it's still Dalvin Cook. He had the 5th best opportunity share, but he hit career lows in broken tackle rate, career lows in yards after contact,
That's
career
right.
lows in yards over expectation. He is trending down fast. I mean, they invested a lot of money in a depreciating asset. And I think that Aaron Rodgers sees 2018, 2019, 2020 Dalvin Cook, and they didn't sign him. They signed 2023 Dalvin Cook.
They're paying him $8.5 million a year. That's starter money to be a starter. That's what's happening. That's just what's happening. Yeah. That is what is happening. Now, talk to us about what is happening in New England.
I mean, kind of similar to what is happening in the New York. I don't know if I really want either of these guys. What I'm hoping happens, like more than anything, I'm hoping that Rhamondre Stevenson slips in ADP. Again, we talk about trying to anticipate transactions, and I have been screaming from the rooftops since February. You guys are crazy if you think Bill Belichick is going into the 2023 season with this running back room as is. And I wanted nothing to do with Rhamondre at the 2-3 turn, and he has stayed there steadily all off season long. I get really, really nervous looking at this because this is going to sound crazy, but bear with me. Let me finish this thought here.
Oh yeah.
I think what hurts Rhamondre Stevenson is how good he is. All right. We don't know how Bill Belichick is going to deploy these running backs, but we know that Bill Belichick isn't going to have a workhorse back. 30 plus years of coaching tendencies tell us that he likes to have these hyper specialized roles for his running backs. And Rhamondre Stevenson can do it all. He can be the pass catcher. He can be the goal line back. He can be the early down grinder. And Zeke also is a good pass blocker. He's good at the goal line. He's good in short yardage situations. So trying to project who is going to have what role in New England is near impossible right now. And I think people have just kind of tricked themselves into thinking Rhamondre Stevenson is going to see 80-plus targets. Well, I don't want to say I'm scared off by Ty Montgomery, but we've been hearing a steady drumbeat for 2 years about Ty Montgomery. They've also got Pierre Strong, who profiles to be a very good pass catching back. So there is a realistic world that we're living in this 2023 season where Zeke gets the goal line work, Ty Montgomery and Pierre Strong get the pass catching work, and Rhamondre Stevenson is the new Damian Harris. And it's not because he's not a good player, but if he's getting nothing but low calorie touches on early downs, that's terrible for fantasy.
It's terrifying. Pierre Strong's going to make the roster. Pierre Strong's going to be active. I don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Harris. Kevin Harris may end up on a different team, and that would be the best thing that could happen to Kevin Harris. This may be a blessing in disguise for Kevin Harris, that it ends up helping him climb a different depth chart on a better offense. So that's my glass half full on Kevin Harris. But Pierre Strong is not just going to fade away. He was a 5th-round pick. They're not going to let him go. Okay, they're not just going to cut him. That's not going to happen. He also was super explosive when called upon last year. And if it's me and I'm the Patriots and I'm running a 2-minute drill offense, I want Pierre Strong out there. He actually offers the most, right? He gives me the most expected value, expected yards, expected touchdowns on any given play, especially in a 2-minute drill scenario. So this has all the earmarks of a touch squeeze, where Rhamondre Stevenson is a jack of all trades. He's good at everything. He's not great at everything. He's actually great at nothing. So he's good at everything, great at nothing, and those running backs are the most susceptible to being squeezed by a goal line back on one side and a satellite back on the other. A guy that goes from hundreds and hundreds, all the touches he could possibly handle. Like, you know, you get 100 targets and you get 200 plus carries and it's great and it's goal line and it's swing passes and it's all these like super juicy fantasy point scoring opportunities. And then suddenly the next thing you know, it's between the 20s carries. And it's like, what happened? What? But I thought but last year, because he did those things last year. So now Strong's a year more experienced and they have Zeke and now it's not, Have you seen the Patriots backfield be consistent year to year ever? One year it's Dion Lewis. The next year it's LeGarrette Blount. I mean, it's Kevin Falk. It's someone else every year is leading this backfield in fantasy points every damn year.
And Corey Dillon and LeGarrette Blount were both guys that were dust when they showed up in New England. And then Bill Belichick just loved him. And don't get me wrong, like Zeke, everything is pointing to the fact that he is dust. Like he was terrible last year. He was terrible the year before. But I think there's often a huge chasm between fantasy analysts and real life football. And Zeke, even if he isn't going to be, stuffing the stat sheet and ripping off 80-yard touchdowns anymore, he's not a liability in the run game. He's always going to find that lane and pick up positive yardage. And that is what gets you on the field. He's also a very good pass blocker. He has all of the traits that Bill Belichick is going to love. He is just a football player through and through. And I'm completely willing to say that Rhamondre Stevenson could be this year's overall RB1. It's completely in his range of outcomes that he could be the overall RB1, but it's also possible that he doesn't get passing down work, he doesn't get goal line work, and he rushes for 800 yards with a few touchdowns and finishes outside the top 24. His range of outcomes is so vast, and I think that people have just been way too overconfident in projecting what his role is going to be. His
upside is still higher than Breece Hall. We're talking about just one broken foot for Zeke, and it's on. It's all systems go for Rhamondre Stevenson. So, but with Zeke there, and they paid him enough to know that he will be there this year, and also he's shown incredible durability and toughness. So you look at the Injury Finder app. It's not likely this guy goes down. And also because he's going to not have quite as many carries as he's had to endure in the past, his injury probability is going to go down even lower. And this is probably just going to be frustrating for those that have drafted Rhamondre Stevenson. And incidentally, I will bring up, everyone loves draft capital. Everyone loves explosiveness. Stevenson has neither. Okay? He's not fast, and he was not a first-round pick, and he wasn't a second-round pick, and he wasn't a third-round pick. He's always been susceptible to a touch squeeze into additional competition. It's just that last year made us all fantasy wanting for a run back. Why can't Bill Belichick just cooperate with fantasy gamers? I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. I wish he would.
Asked that question for 20 years.
I wish he would. And so I know they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about it on First Class Fantasy too, because Rhamondre Stevenson has been a constant thread of debate because he does have that RB1 upside, overall RB1. Like, it's very rare that a big running back, a 225-pound running back, commands that kind of target share. You give that kind of target share to a big back who's also the goal line back on a run-first offense, things can really break that guy's way. And he could, and if they're, especially are games missed by McCaffrey or Eckler, that would be a path for StevenSZN just on his merits to be the RB1. And
or if Zeke gets hurt, because that's what we saw last year. Is Damian Harris
got
hurt,
Zeke gets hurt, and it's game on. But so I'm very interested to hear what the First Class Fantasy guys have to say about this. Billy, Theo, they're actually having Chad Schroeder and Fantasy Mojo all coming on the next episode of First Class Fantasy. I'm going to put a link to the direct link to subscribe to their podcast, and it's going to be on the YouTube channel, of course, to tune into the next First Class Fantasy with Fantasy Mojo, Chad Schroeder. They are going to get into this Rhamondre Stevenson because it really is much, much more of a dilemma and a debate than Breece Hall, even though Breece Hall is better. It's very interesting. And now we have 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions for Dave Kluge after this. Let's take a moment to talk about Underdog Fantasy. Now, many of you have already signed up. Thousands have signed up from Player Profiler already over the years. Underdog has supported us since 2020. Much of what you see on Player Profiler is because of Underdog, because of their support. Get the Underdog app, plug in that promo code UNDERWORLD. I used to play Underdog just for the best ball drafts. I mean, the best ball drafts are amazing. These draft rooms fill so quickly, and you can win life-changing money. You want to take advantage of all the sleepers we talk about on this show? Well, what better place than in an Underdog draft room to do that? And I recommend taking your Underdog play to the next level by diving into their NFL pick'ems. It's important to correlate those NFL pick'ems. You can pick both the quarterbacks and the wide receivers to exceed expectations. Correlate them, and you can 5x your payout. Bada bing, bada boom. Underdog Fantasy, the promo code is UNDERWORLD for an instant deposit match up to $100. Underdog is the truest friend of the underworld. How are people in the chat giving us a hard time about our stance on Rhamondre Stevenson? Our stance on Rhamondre Stevenson is clear. He's still a great pick. I'm not pushing him down much. You push him down some, but his upside is intact. So Joanna in the chat, you need to pound sand. You got to pound sand. You got to go listen to a new show because you're clearly not tuned into what this show is saying. Maybe clear out your ears. I don't know what's happening. Maybe learn English because maybe this language is not something that you understand. So let me say it again. We like Rhamondre Stevenson. He has RB1 overall upside in his range of outcomes. He's still a strong pick, and we like him. But Ezekiel Elliott does create a touch squeeze situation, and it's an unknown what we're going to get from him week to week, where it was very well known what we were going to get from him week to week. How that changes his projection and how that changes where he's a value in fantasy drafts is a fascinating conversation that we actually can't answer for you on this show. This signing just happened, and we're going to start to work it out. We're going to start to process ADPs, and the guys from the First Class Fantasy show are going to help to answer this question, and it's going to be something we work through over the next 7 to 10 days. So please be patient with us, but at no point do we not understand how good, efficient, and bell cowy Rhamondre Stevenson was last year. We get it, okay? You need to open your ears and let the language that we're speaking flow into your brain.
I've got him ranked as a top 12 running back. And if he starts falling in drafts into the fourth round, I'm going to be smashing Rhamondre Stevenson this offseason. All we're saying is that his range of outcomes is extremely vast. I think that the downside that he possesses is deeper than any other running back going in his range, but you could also argue that the upside is higher than any other running back going in his range. So I'm just hoping now, where he's been stuck at the 2-3 turn all offseason, I'm hoping that he falls into the fourth round where it's a little bit more palatable. And I actually feel good about drafting Rhamondre Stevenson rather than, I guess I'll take him here at the top of the third.
Okay, and by the way, a player who has a fortunate year, so he was fortunate last year. There's not a world that you can explain to me where Rhamondre Stevenson was unlucky last year, right? by all accounts of everything I can see, based on the situations that he was running in against the boxes he was facing, he was relatively fortunate, right? There's a spectrum, right? 50% of running backs were relatively lucky. 50% of running backs were relatively unlucky. He was relatively lucky. And one of the giveaways that a running back was relatively lucky last year is when his number of explosive runs is incongruent with his speed. This is a dead giveaway. Speed can be measured using something called the 40 time. Okay, we have something called clocks that we've invented. Okay, so they have clocks, and they clock the time. Rhamondre Stevenson is not fast. So if he's going to be near the top of the league in explosive runs, that's not sustainable for a player who is not fast. That means that he was relatively fortunate last year, and a player can be relatively fortunate and still deliver huge dividends the following year in a year where he's not quite as fortunate, but as long as he's getting the touches and he does have the pass catching skills, which is undisputable, and he's a 225-pound machine of a man at breaking tackles and trucking defenders, then there's nothing to worry about. He can regress, and there's nothing to worry about. Do you understand what I'm saying, Dave? Is this some kind of like foreign concept?
I
to
think
me,
you and
this
I are
is easy to understand.
We're singing the same song here, Matt. You and I are in lockstep. It's I don't know what's
I think what happens is, and this is a bias. I got to remember this. See, I can sometimes tilt. I'm tilting. The chat can tilt me because and this was a YouTube pro gave me this advice. She said, you got to remember, most of the people in the chat are picking up what you're laying down. And because they're picking up what you're laying down, they're not commenting, right? Because when you're preaching to the choir, people are in the pews and they're just nodding their heads and they're singing along and they're having a good time and there's no reason to chat. You're only hearing from the people that are not understanding what you're saying or agreeing with you. So your perception of who's listening just by looking at the chat is completely wrong.
And this is like what we talked about earlier when we were talking about fashion at the top of the show, right? We rarely get compliments. And when we do get compliments, we remember them. So when somebody does compliment me or agree with my take, I like to tell myself there are thousands of other people that agree with this take that just aren't saying so. It's always the people that disagree that are going to be the loudest. I don't know. I think you and I have the same take here. I think it's a very sound, reasonable take, but Rhamondre, man, he has become a polarizing guy. Like, God forbid you have any stance on Rhamondre Stevenson other than this is the best running back in football.
Honestly, one of my least controversial positions of the offseason is everything we laid out on Rhamondre Stevenson in the last 15 minutes, and yet that's what's causing the consternation in the chat. It makes no sense. But it's why we do this, because it's fun. It's fun to not know what the hell you're dealing. Every year, I mean, I start the show up, and I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Every episode, not sure how it's going to go. We'll see how it goes, and that's why it's fun. And then also, I can focus on the positive. Senior football says the Podfather looks great in glasses. So that is what I'm going to focus on. That's what I want to hear. That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Collared shirt and glasses, man. You're really, really rolling out the red carpet today for me.
Now here's I don't know if you heard, but we have burning questions. We have 10 burning questions. You like that sound effect?
Burning.
Yes, that's fire. Okay, so we've had a bunch of fake injury holdouts. What do you make of that?
I feel bad for running backs, man. Like it's sad. It is sad. I really don't know how else to feel. I'm an empathetic person, and I feel bad for running backs because they take a beating. They have the shortest careers, most likely to get injured. They get more touches than any other position, minus quarterback. It's a terrible position to play, and they have no leverage. So I think what they're doing with these fake injuries, it's like a quiet cry for help. It's like the only way they can feel any sort of control. They know that they have no leverage, so they're just going to fake these injuries. I don't know, man. I think we're at the point where the NFL almost needs to step in. And I've heard some like fun solutions to the running back issues.
Like what?
One of them, running backs don't count towards the salary cap. Just completely open up the market. They are no longer part of the salary cap. It is an open market. You can pay running backs whatever you want. Because I think right now we know that running backs are a non-premium position. We talked about it in the draft as well, that teams aren't allocating high draft capital to running backs. So if we say running backs don't count towards the salary cap, then it completely opens up the market. Again, there are some downsides there.
Well, no, that's interesting. It's interesting because we're like, oh, free market. And I love free markets, okay? Free markets are great. But typically in a free labor market, what you have is the most dangerous, an oil derrick engineer.
Yeah.
Right? Someone who think about the person who has to go down into the water and guide the drill bit to the bottom of the ocean and then make sure that like you can create a whole suction system to pull crude oil out of the bottom of the ocean, which is many, many feet below the actual bottom of the ocean floor. It's a dangerous job, right? There's been movies made about it with Mark Wahlberg, of course, right? And it's was it Deep Horizon, something like that? So that's most of the market. If it's a dangerous job, you get paid a premium, right? The problem is running backs, the way the collective bargaining agreement is, it doesn't factor in injury rates or length of career. And so you have a dangerous position with a shorter lifespan, and it's treated the same as every other position in the collective bargaining agreement. So you have this incongruence of, hey, this is a real bummer to be this guy, and I'm getting paid less to be exposed to more danger, and I get to make less money because the position is devalued, and I don't get to play for as long because the sport chews up my legs. So that's just not fair. So I'm a fan of markets and freedom, and I'm also a fan of fairness. So in that context, given that, I think that everyone should be open to creative solutions to help running backs make a little more money.
And I think,
again, it's a crazy position. Nuts.
I don't think the issue is these billionaire owners saying, I'm trying to nickel and dime these running backs. The issue is saying we only have a finite amount of money to spend, and we don't want to spend a big chunk of that finite money on a, volatile asset. And that's really what it comes down to. So I think that if we are able to just say, okay, running backs are getting the short end of the stick right now because of the reasons that we've talked about here. If you open up the market, then I think that we see those salaries go up a little bit. I think another creative solution is that they have a different contract rule. Right now with the 5-year, 5th-year option and then a franchise tag, you got like the 5 years plus one. That is an entire, that's a first-round running back. Their entire career is basically with one team where they can play their 4 years, pick up the 5th-year option, franchise tag, and then at that point, they're 28, they're 29 years old, and they're dust. So what if we say rather than a 4-year rookie contract, it's a 2-year rookie contract? What if we get rid of franchise tags? I feel like we have to just start looking at the running back as a different solution. And the way the current collective bargaining agreement and the salary cap is working, I understand why. GMs and team owners are doing what they're doing, but it sucks for running backs, man. And I feel like we've got to do something to change it.
They're just going to have to wait to the next collective bargaining agreement, though. The whole point of this is, unfortunately, that you can't just arbitrarily change something that's been collectively bargained on a whim. It has to be done as part of the process, unfortunately. So they're going to have to wait, but when the next round of negotiations comes up, they do need to take care of running backs. Now, I want you to tell me who your running back 3, 4, 5 is from this rookie class.
So 1 and 2 are pretty.
Oh, come on.
We know who 1 and 2 are, right?
I don't need you. I know. We know 1 and 2.
And 3, 4, 5. Know number 3. You probably know number 3. Is anybody putting somebody besides Zach Charbonnet at RB3? I think that's kind of the obvious one there. Running back 4 for me is Roschon Johnson, and running back 5 for me is Tank Bigsby. So
so this partially explains why you're not more bullish on Etienne.
I am bullish on Etienne. I
don't know. Now if you have Bigsby at 5.
I mean, are we talking this year or are we talking Dynasty here? Because I took the question.
And by the way, I have Roschon ahead of Charbonnet.
Really?
Well,
I mean,
what do you
I don't
really?
dislike it. I don't dislike it.
Who do you think's better, Kenneth Walker or Khalil Herbert? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, if we're looking at this year, I think we can make a strong argument to take Roschon ahead of Charbonnet. I thought this was a dynasty question.
Dynasty? Kenneth Walker's got 3 years left. What do you mean? Where do you think he's going? Where do you think the Mackey Award winner, the Doak Walker Award winner, where do you think he's going? Think he's just going to evaporate? You think he's just going to fly away? Think he's going to turn into a butterfly?
My kind of thesis on Zach Charbonnet, I got these stats from Player Profiler.
Oh, yeah.
Familiar.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Really good website. Really good website.
Yeah.
Zach Charbonnet had triple the target share that Kenneth Walker had in college. He also profiles to be the goal line back, so kind of like we were talking about with Rhamondre Stevenson.
Profiles to be the goal line back? Who would give the ball to Charbonnet over Walker?
He's taller, heavier, and he had a better success rate. So we can see a world where, like we were just talking about with Rhamondre Stevenson, where Kenneth Walker is getting more work, but he's getting all the low-calorie touches. He's the early down grinder, passing down work and goal line work. If that both falls Zach Charbonnet's way,
no.
So I am very much
No. This is where advanced metrics can be used against you. It can hurt your analysis if you're going to take the success rate at the goal line, which is a small sample at UCLA versus a success rate at Michigan State.
Fair.
You're going to focus on the wrong details. Who is the more violent, trusted runner? It's absolutely Kenneth Walker. If Zach Charbonnet can prove himself to be, trusted with ball security, that's an open question. We haven't seen him in the NFL yet. So we'll see the ball security. We'll see about all these things. He has to take a number of steps in his career in order to match what we already know about Kenneth Walker as a runner. And that is especially true at the goal line, inside the 5. He's big enough, right? I mean, all the red zone work was going to Austin Eckler last year, and he's 200 pounds. I mean, that's the same thing with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Kenneth Walker is one of the best runners in the NFL because it's very rare you have a Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb skill set where you can break tackles but also put your foot in the ground and just be gone with breakaway speed. Right. Those guys are very rare. We talked about that with Rhamondre Stevenson. He can shake off defenders, but
he doesn't have
the breakaway speed, he's going to have big, long runs when defenders take bad angles, but he won't consistently run away from the best defenders in the league or defenders that are they're technically sound, taking the right angles. They're going to get to Stevenson. They're not going to get to Walker. And so in that world, I just don't see how Charbonnet becomes a guy that's not a rotational back, that's fine, that's interesting, who has this contingent value every year should something happen to Walker. That's always going to be out there. I think that he checks a lot of boxes. Size, athleticism. You could argue that only Bijan Robinson checks those boxes like Zach Charbonnet does. But also, Roschon is similar in terms of size and athleticism. Not quite as fast as Charbonnet, but it's nominal difference, right? But Roschon has a much lower bar of running back ahead of him. And, I think an equally exciting offense. The Bears are going to be exciting like the Seahawks, and one of the big reasons is their defenses are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what's exciting? I mean, do you think that people are missing this with Justin Fields, this component of it with Justin Fields and DJ Moore? They don't have a choice. They're going to have to throw, man.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say I'm buying what you're selling on Roschon over Charbonnet. And that's something that I hadn't even thought of. I just kind of look at draft capital as my driving factor so often, and you see that early second round pick on Zach Charbonnet, or mid second round pick, I should say, I hadn't even really thought about putting Roschon Johnson ahead of Charbonnet.
Got to get Roschon up.
You got my wheels
we had Kendre ahead of him as well, but Kendre with the injury, the sprained knee, you can't have Kendre Miller ahead of Zach Charbonnet anymore. You can't do it.
So Kendre was my RB4,
right?
But I mean, it's just been. I feel like I've just been getting pummeled as a Kendre Miller fan, man.
You
Kareem Hunt
can't.
coming
You
in
can't. I used to
there,
hold on to these guys through all these injuries. I used to just post these guys up, and I'm not a flip flopper, blah blah blah. But when a guy missed the whole process, the whole pre-draft process with lower body problems, and now he's got a sprained knee. Injuries beget more injuries. This is a known thing. They increase your probability of being hurt again. So now, actually, there's no rookie running back that's more injury prone from this point forward than Kendre Miller. It's terrifying.
And we talked about him on this morning's episode of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show, and I have been the guy all offseason touting Kendre Miller, looking at my 21% exposure bags on Kendre Miller, and then I had to swallow it yesterday. Episode came out this morning, and
man, you're having a tough offseason, dude.
Yeah, I'm getting beat left and right.
Jeez, you're getting beat up.
I'm trying not to take too many L's before the season even starts, but yeah, Kendre Miller was a tough one, and I identified him as my biggest faller in preseason so far, and he's been a guy that I have been all over. The big thing with Kendre Miller, especially too, is the idea with Kendre Miller is that there was going to be this 3-week head start where he'd get to solidify himself before Alvin Kamara returned. And now, by the time he's healthy and he's back, first of all, he's going to have missed camp. And we know there's a strong correlation between a rookie missing camp and performing this rookie season. He's going to show up. Alvin Kamara is going to be on the field. Jamal Williams is going to have solidified his role. It's bad, man. It's bad. Yeah. Yeah,
dude, I mean, listen, man, I'm with you, man. I saw my life flash before my eyes with this whole Rachaad White injury scare, right? I mean, that would have buried me. That would have buried me. Thank God, and
scary stuff.
And Pollard too, right? Pollard, like, please, Pollard and Rachaad White. Can you believe how Tony Pollard is walking around raindrops right now? I mean, unbelievable, this guy.
I mean, I kind of get it. I mean, he was the RB8 last year on like the 34th best opportunity share in the league. Like, he was just making things happen. And I think that his touchdown rate comes down a little bit, but there's nobody else on that offense that I'm concerned about. Nobody else in that backfield. I'm not scared off by Ronald Jones. I'm not scared off by Malik Davis, Deuce Vaughn. Are you kidding me? Is anybody scared off by Deuce Vaughn? Yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard is one of the most efficient running backs in the league on a powerhouse offense.
Bro.
Yeah, I mean, he's fun, but like we said, where he's getting drafted at the 1-2 turn, I'll throw some darts because I want to have that exposure, but he kind of falls into that. You can make the argument to draft him as the RB1. I mean, there's huge question marks surrounding every running back this year, but Tony Pollard is one of the few that doesn't really have a lot of question marks.
That's right. That's right. All those you're dealing with all this uncertainty when you're trying to project Rhamondre Stevenson, right? Uncertainty about even who the quarterback is. Think about all the uncertainties with the backfield in New England now, right? There's nothing. There's not a single drop of uncertainty with what's going on in Dallas. Behind Tony Pollard, it's Rico Dowdle, dude. And there's only Leonard Fournette left in free agency. So we now down to one guy left in a bunch of teams that need running back depth. And we know what this offense is. This is the first offseason that Dak Prescott has been able to practice with the team on a consistent basis since 2020. And in 2020, he was the QB1 in fantasy points per game. I know it was just the month of September and October that he played that year, but he did put up 28 fantasy points per game. He was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. All of this is happening. If the rest of the NFC East is getting better. everything is clicking into place and pointing in the right direction, where I see a bunch of arrows going in all kinds of different directions in New England, and I don't know what the hell to make of it. Everything is all systems go. Everything is green lights. Everything is tailwind with Tony Pollard.
Yeah, it's hard to build an anti-Tony Pollard case. The only case that you can build against Tony Pollard is, well, maybe they signed Leonard Fournette, or maybe they signed Kareem Hunt. And even that, I mean, that would add a wrinkle into the equation, and it makes things a little bit tougher to project. But, at that point, he falls into ADP where he's an even better value. And he was able to perform last year with Ezekiel Elliott, so no reason to think that he can't perform with another one of these veterans in the mix. Yeah, I think the two guys that, Nick Chubb, not a whole lot of question marks around him. He's a pretty safe pick as well. And Tony Pollard is a pretty safe pick as well. So I like both of them if I can get them in round two. We talk about building these hero RB teams with not a first round running back. Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb in round two, Jahmyr Gibbs and Joe Mixon in round three. Those are the guys that I like taking this year.
Yeah, I like Chubb and Pollard as my hero RBs, and then Etienne in round four as a hero RB, and then after that, you're just going zero.
And I think we just overthought things with Etienne a little bit. Like, don't get me wrong, I just said, I like Tank Bigsby as my RB5 in this class, but what is there not to like about Etienne? I mean, he was top 10 in yards per reception last year, top 10 in yards per touch, top 10 in breakaway run rate, top 10 in red zone touches.
You're going to see the catches this year. I can promise you that. A guy goes out and gets 60 targets in a college season, and you're telling me that his ability to catch footballs is just going to go away? That's not true. It's a 17-game season.
And
you're susceptible to a small sample outlier outcomes in a handful of games where the guy just, for whatever reason, you run the simulations on that season. Of course he's going to have a game with more than 3 catches. I bet you ran the simulation on last year's season 10 times. You only have 1 out of 10 where Etienne caps out at 3 catches.
Let me ask you, if Tank Bigsby's name was John Johnson, would people be scared off by him? He's just got the coolest name maybe in NFL history for a running back. Tank Bigsby. Like, it doesn't get cooler than that.
That's true.
That's the only reason people are scared. I mean, Tank Bigsby. That sounds like a name like in a create a player Madden. Like you'd make up a name for a running back. Like it is so cool. Like the 101 of running back names. That's the only reason people don't want to draft Travis Etienne. He gets catches. He gets goal line work. He is on one of the best offenses in the NFL. He's a first round pick tied to a generational quarterback, and people are finding reasons to fade him. Why?
It's the fickle fantasy gamer, man. It's every year. There's a couple of guys that I'm drafting a lot of. This year happens to be Etienne and Rachaad White, and I can't explain it, and it's just the fickle fantasy gamer. Something, some kind of worm crawls into the ear of the collective fantasy brain, and people just are off him. I don't know why. I don't know why they're off him. I can't explain it. Don't ask me to explain it. I can't explain it. Just like I can't explain third round Calvin Ridley. I can't explain that one either.
The script on you. Because you have mentioned Rachaad White a few times, and we've been agreeing a lot on this show, which is awesome. I love agreeing. Smart people agreeing with my takes makes me feel smart, so it's been fun. But Rachaad White is a guy that I really struggle to pull the trigger on. And for me, what I saw last year was his inability to fight off a dusty Leonard Fournette. Like, Leonard Fournette was still the 1A for the majority of the season there. And then when I look at rushing yards over expectation per attempt, it's one of my favorite efficiency metrics, the worst in the league last year. It was Melvin Gordon, Michael Carter, James Robinson, Leonard Fournette, Najee Harris, Ezekiel Elliott, and Rachaad White. So that's not an offensive
line agnostic metric. He had the worst offensive line in football. He had that year that these teams have, like the Patriots have these years. And it's not just about, what was his juke rate? His juke rate was not great, but it wasn't exceptional. That's evaded tackles per touch on Player Profiler. So that helps. That's offensive line agnostic. He wasn't creating a ton of yards on his own, but he also wasn't in a position to make guys miss. He was facing a lot of guys that were getting squared up angles on him because they didn't have any resistance from the offensive line. So I think that if you increase the sample to a full year of workload, you're going to see that particular set of metrics come back into balance, because we know from college that this guy was an all-purpose stud. And if he's going to be that good in the receiving game at that size, my sense is that the efficiency he showed in space as a receiver will start up between the tackles and out in space on wide runs as well this year. I don't have any evidence of that because he's only had the partial season in the NFL. That's the problem with some of these sophomores that weren't starters last year for any length of time, is that we don't have a serious sample. We have to zoom out. We have to incorporate their college resume into our analysis, and that's what I'm doing with Rachaad White. What I know about Rachaad White is he is the locked-in bell cow, and he's the least expensive locked-in bell cow you're going to find, and he's by far and away the least expensive bell cow with his receiving skills. I mean, you got to go up many rounds in the draft to find Gibbs isn't that guy. Gibbs is going to be out-touched by Rachaad White, and I know Gibbs is in a much better offense, but you got guys in bad offenses that are going in round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's just the bad offense isn't enough to fade the guy. If the guy's going to be getting all the touches, if it's a banged up Chase Edmonds and a banged up Keyshawn Vaughn, you're not allowed to be surprised when the guy puts up an 80% opportunity share, and he can't fail with that opportunity share. He just can't. He can't at that ADP. He's going to deliver value. And in the off chance that a healthy offensive line actually makes him that much more efficient than he was last year, and if in the off chance Baker Mayfield is just slightly more efficient than he was the last couple of years because he's healthier and the offensive line's better, next thing you know, he's a top 10 pick next year.
I can get behind it. I mean, I understand the case for the upside. I'm just, I don't know if Rachaad White showed me last year that he, and I get the argument what he did in college, and I think,
but you're also, Dave, you're also doing that thing that I get annoyed by.
Let me have it.
Which is you're changing the narrative ex post facto. Okay, because if I remember correctly, the narrative was that he's going to back up Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette was the Super Bowl hero who's going to have the swan song with Tom Brady, and he's going to be the bell cow, and he's going to go do Leonard Fournette things through age 27, and then he's going to sail off, right, into the Gulf of Mexico, right? At no point was anyone thinking or speculating or even discussing the possibility that just on his merits, Rachaad White would supplant Leonard Fournette, a healthy Leonard Fournette, at any point during that season with Tom Brady, that a rookie running back would come in and have that level of trust with Tom Brady as a pass blocker and all those things. And then he does it, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to tell a story the following year that you thought it took him too long? Shame on you, Dave Kluge. Shame on you. That's
how I know you're pissed, because you mispronounced
that is dishonest.
That's how I know I got understand.
That's just dishonest.
I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year had Super Bowl aspirations, and Leonard Fournette, by all intents and purposes, sucked last year. So if they had a better option in Rachaad White, and they said, all right, this guy is too good, we can't ignore him, we need to get him on the field, I think it would have happened.
It did happen.
I mean, I understand with Alexander Mattison, we saw it over a 4-year sample, but it's not all that different from Alexander Mattison.
Alexander Mattison never outsnapped a healthy Dalvin Cook. It never happened. All his touches were when Dalvin Cook missed time. There was never a game that I can go back and say, in the weeks leading up to this game, Alexander Mattison convinced the Vikings coaches that he should get more touches and more snaps, right, than Dalvin Cook. That never happened. Okay, that did actually happen in Rachaad White's rookie year. He convinced the coaches to let him outsnap Leonard Fournette.
That's news to me, and I didn't realize that. So that's That's a good knowledge drop right there. I don't know. We talk about bad offenses, and I guess if you're going to invest in a bad offense, I'd prefer it to be in the 6th round rather than the 1st round, a la Bijan Robinson.
We're back. We're back. We're back. We're back, Dave. We're back. This is great. That's what I want to hear, man. We're back.
The show it's very cyclical. We come back.
That's so great. It's so great to have you back.
All right, man.
I shamed you into being my friend again. That's great. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I mentioned, by the way, earlier, another burning question was the Calvin Ridley situation. Because, I mean, I know that we like the Jaguars, all the reasons we were drafting Travis Etienne, and I love the Cowboys. But, when I look at just ADP differentials, situational skill differentials in ADP, I can't get my head around the differential between a Calvin Ridley and someone like Brandon Cooks. These guys are similar ages. They have sort of similar roles, I believe, in ascending offenses. I'm just as excited to see Brandon Cooks with a star on his helmet as I am to see Calvin Ridley with the 0 and the Jaguar, and yet one guy's 3rd round, one guy's 8th, 9th round.
Did Brandon Cooks ever go for 1,400 yards, sharing a field with Julio Jones?
No.
Calvin Ridley did.
I know. He did.
I think Calvin Ridley is just a much better player. So I all offseason, I was fading Calvin Ridley.
Much better player? Brandon Cooks is pretty damn good, dude.
He's pretty damn good.
But he's not an alpha, and neither is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley had that 1 year where Julio Jones could barely walk, and Matt Ryan threw the ball 777 times.
So let me preface this by saying, again, we talked about how I just had Kendre Miller as one of my camp fallers. The day before that, we did a show on camp risers, and Calvin Ridley was one of my camp risers. All offseason, I was saying, Christian Kirk just isn't going to disappear. Calvin Ridley's 2 years removed from football, often injured, new quarterback, all these things. And there were a lot of red flags, and I just kept asking myself, why is Calvin Ridley getting drafted in round 3? What am I missing? So I went back in the football history, started watching some games from 2020, and I said, oh yeah, Calvin Ridley is really, really good at football. And then what we're seeing now out of camp, we tell ourselves all the time, don't overreact to camp clips. You're going to see these clips littering your Twitter feed, and you don't want to overreact to them, but he looks good. I mean, he looks fast. He's quick. He's still a polished route runner, which is exactly what he was drafted for and what he did well in Atlanta. And it's admittedly impossible to build like a data-based case for Calvin Ridley because his career trajectory of like being buried behind one of the best wide receivers in NFL history for 2 years, seizing the opportunity, and then Julio Jones leaves, and then he gets injured, and then he gets suspended for gambling, and then he goes to a new team. Nobody has ever had that NFL career trajectory. So, I mean, we really have to paint a picture.
We have one player that had a similar trajectory.
Let's hear it.
Josh Gordon.
Come on, man. No.
Hey, that one season that we all remember.
That was his rookie year, right? That was
that one season, that one outlier season. He wasn't that efficient, but he did have all the stats you could ever imagine. 1,600 yards. Double-digit touchdowns on a bad team. I mean, it was amazing. And then what happens? He needs to take time away to take care of himself. Then he's breaking league rules. He gets suspended for a year, comes back, has to change teams, goes to a new team, goes to the Patriots, looks amazing with the Patriots. I mean, they talk about in soccer, they talk about how a guy looks in the kit, right? You're like, man, that guy wears his kit well. How does he wear the kit, right? That's what they always talk about in soccer. How does he wear the kit, right? Josh Gordon could wear a football uniform. That guy looked great in the kit. Calvin Ridley looks great in the Jacksonville kit.
I can't get behind a Calvin Ridley.
You can't.
Oh, man, get out of here, man. You're crazy. You're crazy. I love
It's
you, man.
fine.
No.
It's the best. Listen, I think deeply about these things because it's my job. Thankfully, we have this as our jobs. And I tried my best. I people were throwing out all kinds, even non-wide receivers, Le'Veon Bell and all these things. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a good one, but the best I can do is Josh Gordon.
So
it's not like Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is a straight up close comp with John Ross. That's not this. This is a guy who is very unique. He's an enigmatic wide receiver. That's without a doubt. We don't have good comps for him. This is the best we can do. Josh Gordon's like 30 pounds heavier. It's not a good comp. I'm not saying it's a good comp. I'm saying we don't have one. And this is the best I can do.
So, I mean, again, I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong on Calvin Ridley. Much like we talked about with Rhamondre Stevenson, the range of outcomes is vast. And when you get to that point in the draft, when you're looking at wide receivers and you get down into the Calvin Ridley range, you're looking at T. Higgins, who is a great wide receiver. And if something happens to Jamar Chase, he's got a huge upside there. And DK
just
Metcalf,
like Calvin Ridley, if something happens to Christian Kirk.
Don't get me wrong, man. I love Christian Kirk. I'm still drafting a ton of Christian Kirk, but I don't know if there's a player with higher upside in that range than Calvin Ridley. If he can be the player that we saw in 2020 and 2021 before the injury, the guy that we saw in Atlanta, if he can be that guy on what projects to be a high-powered offense that's going to be, top 8, top 7 in plays run. They're going to throw the ball a ton. Trevor Lawrence is probably throwing for 4,000 plus yards this year. Calvin Ridley has that, I don't want to say overall wide receiver one in his range of outcomes because that would take an incredible amount of touchdown luck, but Calvin Ridley could easily be a top 5 wide receiver this year, and you're drafting him as, potentially your wide receiver 3.
At his ADP, I'd rather have DK Metcalf, and I would actually rather have a guy that goes 10 picks later in Jerry Jeudy.
I think the range of outcomes for Jerry Jeudy is much more narrow. I think it's a safer pick for sure, but I don't know if Jerry Jeudy can hit a top 5 wide receiver outcome, which is what I'm hoping for with Calvin Ridley. So
I got to admit it. In the third round, when I'm drafting I don't like drafting running backs in the third round because they can be Breece Hall and Rhamondre Stevenson, and the trap door could be pulled out from under them. That's why it's very dangerous. If I'm going to go wide receiver, I'm going to wear a condom. I do. In round 3, I'm going safety first. I am.
I get it.
I'm slipping it on, and I'm going Jerry Jeudy. It's a safer move. He's the clear number 1. This is an offense that's destined to improve for reasons you even talked about earlier with the investments in the offensive line. It's going to be better. New coach, new offensive line, fresh start, humbled Russell Wilson. Cortland Sutton's a bust. You're getting Mims stretching the field, creating as much space as possible for Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately, has become less efficient year over year. So I don't like that signal, but given his situation and the fact that he does command targets down the field, regardless of whether he's one of the league leaders in separation, which he has not been recently, though I think he still has that in his skill set if he can figure out how to run routes again. I do think he has a higher floor than Calvin Ridley, and that's what I'm drafting in that zone because I'm holding all my upside picks for rounds 5 through 20.
So are we talking about 2 different games here? Because I'm looking at underdog ADP, where Calvin Ridley's going in the 3rd round, and in underdog, you're competing against hundreds of thousands of people for millions of dollars, and you're not going to take down a tournament like that by playing it safe. So that's why I want to swing for the high-end range of outcomes with Calvin Ridley. Now, once I get into my home league with my buddies and we're playing for $100 and I want to play it a little bit safer because I'm only playing in a pool against 11 other guys, then I am probably taking Jerry Jeudy ahead of Calvin Ridley. But in that format, I also expect Calvin Ridley to slide into the 4th or 5th round. I think he's getting steamed up on underdog right now because of the high-end range of outcomes, similarly to Rhamondre Stevenson.
And I don't agree with it. And I don't agree with it. Just like I don't agree with the criticism. I remember drafting Travis Kelce and then coming right back. We did an underdog live draft. And by the way, we love underdog, sponsoring the show. And, we would talk about it regardless, whether they sponsored us or not. That's because it's the best place to play best ball. Now, I came right back and I did the chalk move. You can probably guess who I drafted in the second round, the mid-second round after I drafted Travis Kelce. Can you guess? His name's Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
All right. So he's tech. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like, oh, that's chalk. You're not going to get unique. And then I had to remind everybody. I was like, first of all, that's silly. That's nonsense, right? You have plenty of upside for the rest of the draft and lots of ways that you can get unique, either letting value fall to you that rarely falls to you or drafting a guy or a sequence of players that no one else is drafting. And then you will be, by definition, unique. You don't have to swing for the fences and be unique and be naked upside only with every single pick. That is a common best ball fallacy.
I get it. I mean, I do get it, but I also understand the case for drafting a guy who could hit the high-end range of outcomes.
Can't draft Kelce and Mahomes together. That's too common. Can't draft Jerry Jeudy. Doesn't have a high enough range of outcomes. Who the hell can I draft? I can only draft the riskiest possible dudes that no one else is thinking about drafting in particular orders and particular combinations?
Yeah, he's swinging for the fences,
Jesus
man.
Christ, Dave!
When I'm in these BBM drafts, I don't know if you're much of a baseball guy. You know Adam Dunn? That's me, man. I'm either swinging for a home run or striking out. Nothing in between.
I love it. I love it. Okay, how about Elijah Moore? Enough upside for you late?
I like Elijah Moore, but my spiciest takes is that because I've heard you singing this song that Elijah Moore could potentially outscore Amari Cooper, and
yes.
And I just don't think that's possible. I mean, it's possible, but it's as possible as Donovan Peoples-Jones outscoring Elijah Moore. I think that it's just kind of slim. I just think Amari Cooper is going to be the locked and loaded wide receiver one there. And I don't think that Elijah Moore has any chance of jumping ahead of him in the pecking order. And that's really what it comes down to.
Go back and look at the annual production of Brandon Cooks, who is a 8th, 9th round receiver, and Amari Cooper. Okay? It's not much different. It is not much different. We're talking about guys that are hovering in the 1,100-yard zone.
1,000+ lock every year. Yeah.
Year out. That's what you're getting. One guy is going in the 8th round on what's going to be an even more prolific offense than the other guy, and that's Brandon Cooks. So that's the type of arbitrage I'm talking about, and that's also the zone. The Brandon Cook zone is also the zone for Elijah Moore. And if this is the prolific offense that it projects to be, because the AFC North is going to be a shootout division, and thankfully, Deshaun Watson has been absent from the tabloids. We haven't heard a thing about Deshaun Watson. That's best case scenario. There are certain players where you're very happy. Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson being two of them, where I want to hear nothing. I want radio silence. I want to hear not a single thing about Dak Prescott. I don't want to hear about an elbow. I don't want to hear about a groin. I don't want to hear about a shoulder. I don't want to hear about a hip. I don't want to hear about anything with Dak Prescott. I don't want to hear about a goddamn thing from Deshaun Watson, right? So this tells me that it's a possibility that something interesting could happen in Cleveland where, yes, Amari Cooper gets his 1,100 yards, even though he did very little, didn't even score a touchdown in December. The only month he had, the full month he had with Deshaun Watson, he had his worst month of the season last year. So
Deshaun Watson stunk last year.
He did not develop rapport with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson had better rapport with Donovan Peoples-Jones last year. So I think the door is open. Now, the reports from camp are that there's a strong connection between Watson And yes, see, strong connection between Watson and Amari Cooper. I fully expect Amari Cooper to be Amari Cooper, but Amari Cooper is like Calvin Ridley and like Jerry Jeudy and a lot of these Alabama receivers in that they are best deployed as volume betas, right? They are not true alphas. And no, Elijah Moore does not necessarily profile as an alpha. He's best comparable to Tyler Lockett, also an upside beta. Love it, right? But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about two guys putting up similar fantasy production seasons. One guy doing it with more catches, one guy doing it potentially with more yards, and then it's going to come down to touchdowns. That's how it could be close, and they could both be productive just because this is a tide that lifts all boats offense in Cleveland.
So I feel like I'm being like forced into saying something that I don't want to say. First of all, I was checking my exposure on Underdog today. My second most rostered stack in Underdog right now is Deshaun Watson and Elijah Moore. It's just so easy at the 8-9 turn when they're both sitting there. How do you not take both of them?
Well, do you have more of that stack, or do you have more Fields and DJ Moore at the 4-5 turn?
That is my number one stack.
I knew it!
DJ Moore.
I knew it! I knew it! God, I know you! God, you got to tell Larky I know you just as well as he does.
You do. And I mean, how could you not? It's now it's getting up there in price a little bit, but you know, they were slipping below ADP for a lot of the offseason, and it was just such an easy stack to attack that, yeah, Fields and DJ Moore is my favorite stack, and you can go on and on about that one if you want to. But let's stick to the Browns for now.
Well, no, but on Underdog, this is important. On Underdog, backing into easily constructed stacks is very important. So a few of them are Lamar Jackson and either Bateman or Flowers, because you can get your quarterback locked in, and then there's less competition for those wide receivers because you're competing against yourself to draft them. And the guys you can get back-to-back, whether it be Watson and Moore or Fields and Moore.
Exactly. Yep. And that's why. I mean, it's just too easy. Or, and this is going to sound really gross, but one of my deep ones that I go, if I have not gotten the stacks that I wanted earlier and I still need a quarterback and a tight end, I find myself going with Dalton Schultz and CJ Stroud. Is that kind of gross? Because that is another, like, and that's a late. I'm talking like 15th and 17th.
That's
round.
who wins, man. That's who wins. Yeah. When you go back and look at these teams that win on Underdog, that win the whole thing, they've got those kinds of gross stacks in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the team that I have the most exposure to this year overall is the Cleveland Browns. And I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here about morals and all that stuff, but there is a discount on Deshaun Watson for very understandable reason. And we got to look at a guy that prior to last year was a top 5 quarterback every single year he was in the league. And, you know, it's a cliche, clutch argument, call it whatever you want, but sure, it's his second year in the offense. Now, this is the year that he finally knows he's going into week 1. Last year, there was almost no position for him to succeed. That team had rallied behind Jacoby Brissett, and rightfully so. Jacoby Brissett was playing good football, and then he had to come mid-season playing in the cold with a team he had no rapport with, a team that had been playing with each other, you know, battling week in and week out. I don't think that Deshaun Watson could have succeeded last year, but all signs are pointing up for him. He just, you know, when you look at the upside, sure, a guy like Jared Goff or Tua Tagovailoa or Daniel Jones could sneak in as a back-end QB1. Deshaun Watson still has a top 3 finish in his range of outcomes. Like, he's that good of a quarterback. He's got the rushing upside. He's a prolific passer. He's surrounded with good talent. He's got Nick Chubb, David Njoku, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think this is going to be a powerhouse offense, and I just can't stop drafting it.
I don't see the Goff QB1. I don't see it. You could talk me into Tua, not Goff. Come on now.
This team is going to throw 650 times this year. We're just going off on tangents left and right. We could stick on the Browns.
Well, especially now with Jameson Williams, he's going to be throwing the ball to Khalif Raymond and Denzel Mims. I don't know, man. Anthony Richardson. Richardson is the starter. And Billy Muzio and I feel very strongly that, yes, please, by all means, draft him as the first backup off the board in in one quarterback leagues. If you want to go Cousins, Richardson back to back at the FFPC, you want to double tap quarterback late, no problem, right? Get a Goff, get a Richardson, and see what happens. And you can let week 1 play out and see how it looks. And then you may or may not keep Richardson on your roster. Maybe he is the prince that was promised, and congratulations. But having him ranked in the top 12 quarterbacks is a mistake, especially given that he's going to be functioning in this Colts offense. And in Superflex in particular, you cannot draft him. He is undraftable, radioactive in Superflex, because if you don't get a guy like Goff, if you don't get a guy like Cousins, if you don't get one of these guys in Superflex, you're buried. And if you start taking zeros, anyone that drafted Trey Lance in Superflex the last couple of years knows exactly what I'm talking about. I guarantee you, if you drafted Trey Lance, you did not win. It became a problem. It was an albatross, and you were, either had to make a trade that you could barely stomach to fix the quarterback position, or you were constantly, churning through the Jacoby Brissetts. And it's just something you can't come back from, that kind of mistake in Superflex. So like I said, you want to draft him at ADP and double tap quarterback in single quarterback leagues. I'm fine with it. I'm not doing it, but I'm fine with it. But I am actively evangelizing a hard fade on Anthony Richardson in Superflex and 2 QB leagues. What do you think of that?
I think in Superflex and 2 QB leagues, it makes sense because the acquisition cost, well, you got to get him in like the middle of the second, maybe early third if you're lucky. Like he's going up there in Superflex drafts.
Crazy.
But I'd be lying if I said that I'm not drafting the hell out of Anthony Richardson in best ball right now. I mean, where he's going as a QB2.
Anyone that's been like giving you a personality test as we've been going along in the show knows you're going to be bullish on Anthony Richardson in best ball at this point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Adam Dunn, man, swinging for the fences.
Yeah, we know. It's an Adam Dunn move.
And I think that Anthony Richardson, people have this idea that he's just going to like come in week 1 and just be scoring 25 points a game, Jalen Hurts 2.0. And that's not the reality. I mean, I think the common comp that a lot of people are making is to the Bears and their abysmal offense last year. And despite being terrible, Justin Fields was still smashing in fantasy. But people are so quick to forget that year 1 Justin Fields, he had less than 9 points in his first 3 starts. He was not good right off the bat, even with the rushing upside.
Okay. As offended as I was by your disingenuous remark about Rachaad White, I was very annoyed. I get even more annoyed. The worst is the comparing sophomore seasons to prospective rookie seasons. It is the thing that I hate more than anything else in fantasy, is anyone hitting me with a sophomore season when they're projecting a rookie. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Justin Fields was QB5 when he was the week 1 starter after getting a year of, reps in the NFL. And yeah, you can't make the comparison. Justin Fields stunk as a rookie. And yeah, I mean, granted, he wasn't supposed to start. They had tailored this offense around Andy Dalton, and an ankle injury is what kind of pushed him into a game unexpectedly. But even with Justin Fields, who I think we can inarguably say is the best rushing quarterback in the league, I'm saying it, better than Jalen Hurts, better than Lamar Jackson. He is the best rushing quarterback in the league. Even with that skill set, he had less than 9 points in his first 3 starts. And then we saw some flashes later in the year. He had a 26-point outing and a 19-point outing and a 20-point outing. And he had some good games at the end of his rookie season, but it was a very up and down season. And I think that's what you're drafting Anthony Richardson for. You're not drafting him to be a QB5 this year like Justin Fields was in his sophomore season. You're drafting him for the handful of spike weeks where he is going to put up 20 and 26. But he's also going to have points where he's going to put up, or games where he's going to put up 7 points and 8 points and 9 points. And he's going to have unexpected ups and downs like any rookie will.
And it just makes sense if you actually put yourself in the shoes of these guys. Let's say you're Trey Lance, because we can't talk about Anthony Richardson without bringing up Trey Lance. Let's say you're Trey Lance and you've been playing at North Dakota State, okay? And you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You just cashed a huge check. You just bought a huge house, right? Fast car. You're feeling good, okay? You take a snap in practice, and this is the first time you go to 7-on-7 drills, and you go back to pass, and you just let it rip as you have been, and it's always worked out. And then some pterodactyl professional safety swoops in and picks the ball up out of the air above your guy, and the defense swells, everyone surrounds him and is tapping him on the head, and you're just shaking your head going, how did that happen? That's never happened to me before. That's not normal. Wait, what? And you're trying to process it. And then they're showing it to you in the film room over and over and over and over and over again. And then then you have the tablet, and they tell you to take it home and look at it. And you're just shaking your head going, how is that possible? And that's how a guy like Trey Lance, even now in preseason, is seeing ghosts. It is a very difficult transition, and some guys can never do it. John Gruden absolutely adored Blaine Gabbert. I've never seen one of those episodes of the QB film room show that he did on ESPN.
Spider Y2 Banana. I think that's what they called the show, Spider Y2 Banana.
Yeah, the Y2 Banana thingy. So, I mean, he was just in awe. He was awestruck by Blaine Gabbert. And we're talking about on the whiteboard how smart the guy was, one of the top Wonderlicks. His arm strength, his ability to push the ball downfield, his mobility, it was amazing. And then when he got on a football field, suddenly, I'm not confident in my ability to do that thing I was doing with John Gruden, and I just need to get rid of this thing. It's gotta get rid of it. So it makes sense that what you saw at the combine, at the pro day, hitting the underside of a ceiling with a 60-yard bomb is just not what you see in the pros. You even see guys that actually didn't have that realization until like their second year or their third year, like Carson Wentz.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, I'm that guy, I'm confident. And we've all had that in sports, right? We've all had that in sports where we're just feeling it. In golf, tennis, whatever it is, basketball, you're feeling it. And then suddenly you look up and you're like, this is actually not working out. Why? And then you're questioning why. It might be game number 18, right? Where you're just like, why isn't this working? And then suddenly you can't get it back. And it's a tricky thing, man. And so that's why guys like Anthony Richardson, these rookies that come in, it's not a guarantee that even Bryce Young is going to be anything this year other than looking incompetent.
Right. Completely agree. Now, yes or no, because I've heard this comp a lot. Have you compared Anthony Richardson to Cam Newton?
There's a lot of comps, but the Cam Newton comp is too much of a stretch because
I think it might be one of the worst comps out there. I think
such a prolific runner, such just an epic college player, national champion, Auburn beating Alabama, everything.
And the Heisman, unanimous #1 overall pick.
None of that happened.
3 times the amount of rushing yards, twice as many passing touchdowns. I don't understand that comp whatsoever.
It's a very poor comp. The comps are Josh Allen. Josh Allen's a good comp. Trey Lance is a good comp. And really, if you just want to stick to Trey Lance and Josh Allen, I think it's fair because these are guys that were highly unknown quantities, that were raw projections, One guy was able to figure it out after 2 years of struggling, and he got past it. He's wired in a certain way where and part of Josh Allen, part of it is, and I think what doomed Blaine Gabbert is not overthinking it. Some of this has to do with just that attitude, that DGAF attitude, where I'm actually not going to obsess over the mistakes, right? And sometimes these guys are a little bit too bookish. They're a little bit too studious, and it actually hurts them in that they end up replaying the same play over and over and over and over again to the point that they psych themselves out. So that could be what's happening with Trey Lance. I don't know. I'm not in the film room with him, understanding why he can't hit swing passes and why he's not seeing wide open guys in preseason. I don't understand it. But some of that stuff was happening with Josh Allen, and he found a way to get past it.
Yep.
Some guys never get past it. But that's the range of outcomes. If you want to distill it down to 2 guys, I think that's the range of outcomes for Anthony Richardson. And get out of here with Cam Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton was a can't-miss prospect. Anthony Richardson is a project that was drafted 3rd overall, and a lot of people thought that was a reach. So it's a very silly comp to me.
Have you noticed that Kenneth Gainwell's the RB1 in Philly?
Man, taking a lot of L's this offseason. I told you that, right? We've talked about this already. This was a me thing. This was celebrated. This was nothing to do with Dave Kluge. This is 100% celebrating my takes. I just want to let you know that. I'm not none of this show sheet. I want to make sure this is for the record. None of this show sheet was Dave taking L's. Okay, the Dalvin Cook signing just happened. It's literally something that we are required to talk about. Okay, none of this is you taking L's. If anything, there's a few subtle victory laps for me in here, and that's it. That's all. That's the only agenda. The only agenda on a mansion show sheet is some subtle victory laps from me. It's not about jamming up you. I can tell you that. So first of all, I don't think that Kenneth Gainwell is going to be the featured back. I think that that's being a little bit overblown. I think that what we're going to see here is just a frustrating and impossible to predict committee. And I think that all 4 of these guys, Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott, are all going to make the team. They're all going to get touches. And then after Jalen Hurts gets his serving of the rushing pie, I don't know if any of these guys are going to be fantasy relevant. I think that we're going to see season end finishes for all of these guys. You know, one guy might get lucky and sneak inside the top 30, and then we're going to have another guy at RB 38 and another guy at RB 41. And I'm hitting a couple cliches in this show, but these are guys that I'm okay targeting in best ball, because I think that it's going to be so tough to predict when the touchdowns are going to come and when the big plays are going to come. But I think that it is going to be very much so a hot hand approach. And I think all 4 running backs are going to be active in this offense. So if that's the type of running back rotation that we're looking at, why wouldn't you want Kenneth Gainwell, who's going rounds after Penny and rounds after DeAndre Swift? So,
and he's going to be on the field when the most fantasy points are scored on a per down basis.
2-minute drills. Exactly. Yeah. So I think Gainwell is a guy that I wasn't fading. I was almost dead even on my exposure with Gainwell, floating right around 8% all offseason. But the guy that I really planted a flag on was Rashad Penny. And I was hoping that Rashad Penny would win out, when healthy. I think he's one of the best running backs out there, but when healthy is a pretty huge caveat when talking about Rashad Penny.
Especially guys that are post-Apex. Like when they're 26, 27, it becomes very difficult to wind the clock back and look at efficiency from 3 years ago or college production. Eventually these guys, the league just chews them up.
And we try to be objective in what we do here. It's not a perfect science by any means. What we're doing, trying to project fantasy points and tell you who to pick and who not to pick, but we try to remove our emotions as much as possible and be objective in our analysis. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't holding on to a tinge of pain from last year, where I drafted Kenneth Gainwell every year and he didn't do anything. Like, he was completely worthless. So then going into this year, when I see Kenneth Gainwell's name, I feel that pain from last year, and I don't want to click draft on him again. And I wish that I was able to separate last year's pain from this year's drafts.
Fantasy PTSD, it's real, man. It's real.
It certainly is.
You're not going to want to hear that he's been my number one stash late, so we'll not talk about that. Who's your number one stash late?
Zamir White. I love Zamir White. And I was stashing him way before the Josh Jacobs.
You know he's the starter, apparently. Oh. According to Las Vegas's depth chart, he's the starter.
He should be. And it was great when I was getting him for free. 18th round of every single draft. I would draft my 17th round pick, then queue up Zamir White, hit autopilot, and not even draft in the 18th round. I was just
so everybody knows, he's not the starter anymore, but there was a week when Josh Jacobs was holding in that they released a depth chart to spite Josh Jacobs with Zamir White on top. The bottom line is it was Zamir White, not Amir Abdullah. This is important.
And I thought Zamir White was going to get some work last year because he's a very, very good running back. Like, he's got prototypical size and all that stuff. Again, I've talked about this website a few times, Player Profiler. They put out some great work, but 96th percentile at his 40-yard dash, size-adjusted speed score. I mean, he's good. Zamir White is a really good running back. You go back and watch what he did at Georgia, and he is a very, very, very good running back. I was confused last year. I thought there was going to be a split with Josh McDaniels coming from New England and the way that Belichick kind of handles his guys. It was shocking to see Josh Jacobs just be the guy the way that he was. Maybe that happens again this year. But also when you look at the historical usage and the historical trends for guys that have seen as much work as Josh Jacobs did last year, call it a fluke, call it a trend, call it a curse, call it whatever you want, but those guys do tend to miss time the year after. Yes. So I don't think it's going to be a great high-flying offense in Las Vegas, but right now you're getting Zamir draft at the very end of your drafts. If you get a handful of spot starts where he's the guy, awesome. If Josh Jacobs just refuses to play, or we talk about these fake injuries, Josh Jacobs in week 3 goes, my hammy's not feeling too good, I'm going to sit out for the next 16 weeks. You got a league winner in Zamir White.
So I do some of these videos for YouTube, like top 6 handcuffs and top 5 sleeper receivers. The problem is you're reaching a wide audience, and I had Zamir White penciled in as one of these running backs, but because he's not being drafted in like Yahoo ESPN leagues, it doesn't make sense to put him on that list. People can just pick him up off waivers. That's like another category of player. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, a guy I honestly have as like my, say Scott Fishbowl formats like that, underdog, where it's like, yeah, this is the best value backup running back in the NFL after Kenneth Gainwell. Yeah, right? Regardless of the situation he's in. I mean, the reason why he's going so late is because it's the Raiders and last year's usage for Josh Jacobs and that Zamir White is not a pass catcher. So you put those things together, it makes sense. But we're talking about 14 fantasy points a game. Like the previous Josh Jacobs seasons prior to 2022, those are in Zamir White's range of outcomes on a per game basis. If and when Josh Jacobs misses time, it's going to be he's going to be the workhorse. Mm-hmm. If Josh Jacobs misses time, he's going to be the workhorse, and that's enough. That's enough to make him an incredible value late. I just wish I could have done a video about him. When you're getting drafted in round 18, there's just not much of an audience for that content, unfortunately. Because like I would rather draft him at ADP than say, Tyler Algier, who's also on a bad offense, and he's behind Bijan. And the last thing I want to do is bet against Bijan, even with a handcuff or like a flyer, a bench guy. I'm here to have fun. I'm not here to bet against Bijan. Get out of here. This is as much as I'm not drafting Bijan, or I'm, trying to keep the exposure limited to like 5%, just because you can't be totally out on a guy that can rip your face off to that degree. I understand. I want him to do well. I am so excited about Bijan. I'm not excited about Josh Jacobs. I'm just not. I'll admit it. I'm not. I'm also excited to see Rashad Bateman healthy. I'm super excited about Zay Flowers. Every day there's a new video of Zay Flowers putting a defender on skates. At some point, this has to get you excited.
Yeah, I love Zay Flowers. He is my most rostered rookie by a landslide. Not even close. I have so much Zay Flowers this year. And I think that, we are so overconfident in projecting what we think these wide receivers are going to do because the NFL draft tells us how these teams feel about talent level. And we saw Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison go back to back to back to back in the NFL draft. Meanwhile, there's a 1-round gap between all of them in drafts right now, and Zay Flowers just happens to be the cheapest of the bunch. So this is an offense that I want to invest in. Baltimore Ravens. I'm sure you've talked plenty about the Todd Monken effect and what that's going to do to the Baltimore Ravens offense.
Lamar Zay is the hack of all hacks, especially for managed leagues, seasonal leagues, FFPC leagues.
Don't get me wrong. If I can get the Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack, I love it. But that is a tough stack to get.
It's not easy.
Not something
underdog, not easy. No.
You know what's a really easy stack to get? Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. And I find myself doing that a ton. So I am very much so in on Zay Flowers. And I find myself drafting some Rashad Bateman too. It's tough for me. I don't want to say that I really like one of these guys more than the other. I think anybody that is touting Zay Flowers ahead of Bateman or Bateman ahead of Zay Flowers is setting themselves up for, to look kind of foolish because I think they're very similar players. I mean, not similar players. They're different players, but the range of outcomes and what they can do in this offense is
they're similar enough. Yeah, they're similar enough.
Bateman's got a little bit of a height advantage, nothing too crazy there, but I really like both of these guys, and I'm going to completely cop out if your answer is or question is Zay or Bateman. I like both of these guys, and
I would never ask that. I would never ask that. Don't show the show sheet. Don't show the show sheet. I would never ask that. Don't show the show sheet. What I would rather ask you is how high is Skyy Moore going to eventually get? Are we talking 4th round, 5th round? How high can he get?
I hope he doesn't get that high, but until he creeps into the top 36, I'm going to keep drafting him.
Why not?
Top 36 wide receivers.
Why not? He's getting all the snaps with the starters in preseason. I mean, most of these guys that look like him, Christian Kirk, Golden Tate, did nothing as rookies.
Yeah. Even Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Devontae Adams. It took him 4 years to get warmed up in the NFL.
Yeah,
I mean,
big deal.
These guys coming out of non-Power 5 schools, it takes them time. So I know we're supposed to say like, oh, he was a face
Is this
planter.
a Jalen Tolbert take?
No, it's not. I'm not there yet.
Okay.
I'm not there yet.
All right.
But, we have to give him a pass for year one in the NFL. And typically, if we see a guy do what Skyy Moore did as a rookie, we're going to write him off as a face planner, and we're never going to want to draft him again, and he's dead to us fantasy analysts. But I'm willing to give him a pass. Going from Western Michigan University to the best and arguably the most complex offense in the NFL, there were very understandable learning curves. But now you can't ignore the drumbeat out of camp. All we're hearing is that Skyy Moore is not coming off the field, that he's staying on for 2 wide receiver sets. I can't stop drafting Skyy Moore. I mean, it's crazy that his ADP has creeped up a little bit, but it has not gotten to a point that I am even thinking twice about not drafting him. And we just have been so spoiled with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and these guys showing up immediately as rookies and finishing as fantasy, just wide receiver ones. And that's not always the case. We've been so spoiled in these last few years, and I think that's why there's a discount to be had with Skyy Moore. Was it Theo? I know it was somebody at Player Profiler. I was watching a show recently where somebody talked about how the only other guy to be drafted in the 2nd round out of a non-Power 5 school was Devontae Adams.
That's
in
it.
Like the last decade. Was it
right.
Theo that said it?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And to come out early like that shows that he was special. He's special. He checks all the boxes in college. Super productive. Did it on special teams. Just he's a great football player. I don't think that's up for debate at this point. And I don't understand how this like definitive certainty is being reported out of Chiefs camp that this is a starter with Patrick Mahomes with second-round draft capital, and had an impressive college resume, and no one cares. Because in fantasy drafts, it's a weird zone. I know Christian Kirk's in there. There's some receivers I like in there, but from Judy out to Skyy Moore, that to me, it's a pseudo wasteland of wide receivers that you have to squint to see, and but that's also where I'm drafting running back and quarterback, so it's fine. It's just funny where I'm like, man, I wish I had fewer 7th and 8th round picks. I wish I had more 9th round picks.
Seriously, yeah. It's
I'm like, can I get extra 9th round picks? Because I want Cooks and Elijah Moore, and I want Skyy Moore. I want all the Moores. And
I can't tell you.
I don't have enough 9th round picks. I have too many 7th round picks.
That dynasty brain creeps into my best ball brain, and I'm sitting there looking at the board, and I say, I just want to trade back here, and you can't trade back.
I wish I could trade back. That's exactly right. Yeah, let me trade back.
Like, we keep stepping on the rake year after year after year. Ever since we keep waiting for that breakout wide receiver in Kansas City, and maybe we're doing it again. Who knows? Maybe we're falling for the trap again with Skyy Moore, but I'm willing to take the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just drafting Godwin and DJ Moore and those. I listen. I like plenty of receivers in those rounds. It's not a problem, right? I don't have to squint to see Chris Godwin. He's just always awesome. I don't have to squint to see DJ Moore. He's Chris Godwin, right? Yeah. These are the guy we just pick these guys every time. But yeah, Michael Pittman, that's a tough one. Right? Marquise Brown, that's a tough one. Drake London, that's a really tough one. These Marquise are tough. Brown. These are tough ones for me to figure out. You're not drafting
Marquise Brown? Marquise Brown is one of my most drafted guys this year. I can't stop drafting Marquise Brown.
I think that Michael Wilson and Rondale Moore are good football players. And I just... If
I know you like
he was a different type of player in that offense, I think I would feel differently about it. I still view Marquise Brown as more of a field stretcher. And when you have Kyler Murray or Josh Allen, I think that guy can have a lot of value. The Gabriel Davises of the world.
I know you like to close the show with a bold prediction. Let's save the Marquise Brown conversation because I've got
really. I tweeted yesterday. I tweeted a boom bust tweet. I said boom Brandon Cooks, bust Marquise Brown, because Marquise Brown goes a little bit before Brandon Cooks, and I'm like, one guy's on like the greatest offense and was actually just throughout his career has just been a better player than the other guy, and the other guy is literally being drafted there strictly because he's number one on the depth chart. And if that's the only thing you got going for you, it's hard for me to support that. But let's save that. I'll ask you for a bold prediction, but I need you to tell me your top truther guy. Who's the guy that's fringy in Dynasty, but you're holding on?
I'm wearing the shirt. Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yes!
This has been my guy for years, man.
Why not?
Love Donovan Peoples-Jones.
That's a field stretcher I can believe in.
And you know what? He's not a field stretcher anymore. That's the misconception I think that people have. He has developed into a much better player than just a field stretcher.
Ooh.
Every single year, he has seen his target share go up and his ADOT drop. What that tells us is that he is developing into a better wide receiver. 6% target share as a rookie, 14.4% year 2, and then 19% year 3. Not great, but it is trending upward. His ADOT has gone from 16.6 as a rookie, 15.4 in year 2, and then dropped all the way to 11.2 last year.
Oh, and dude, listen, I've dropped some knowledge nugget bombs on you. Good knowledge nugget bomb. I take it back. Apologies to Donovan Peoples-Jones, his family, his supporters, his friends, everyone, all colleagues, associated. He is not merely a field stretcher. I apologize.
he has developed very well throughout his 3 years. And we knew that he was a raw prospect coming into the league. And that's why he slid into the 6th round, I think. I mean, he slid deep in the draft. And it's because he was raw. But there was a 6-game sample with Deshaun Watson last year. And in those games, Donovan Peoples-Jones ran more routes. Amari Cooper had 37 targets to Donovan Peoples-Jones 32. And Amari Cooper had 21 receptions to Donovan Peoples-Jones's 19. I mean, they were putting up very, very similar metrics last year. Obviously, Amari Cooper had some more touchdowns there. And another metric. Again, I try to stick to player profiler stats because I really like what you guys do. But there's a first read snap. First read target rate that Fantasy Points just started releasing. And I don't know if you've heard about this one or not, but it's good. And it's pretty correlative to fantasy production. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, of his 32 targets, 25 of the 32 targets came on a first read. Compared to Amari Cooper, 29 of his 37 came on a first read. So they're drawing up plays to get the ball in Donovan Peoples-Jones's hand. I love this guy. The one last thing I'll say about him, we know that he's a great, off the charts athleticism, 100% burst score at Player Profiler. I mean, you don't see that often. But if you go back and look at the 2017 high school class, digging real deep here, just to talk about the type of pedigree that Donovan Peoples-Jones had, the top 5 wide receivers coming out of the 2017 high school class. Henry Ruggs, we know what happened there. Donovan Peoples-Jones was number 2, ahead of Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, and Jerry Jeudy. So he went to a not so great school and didn't have the best college career, but off the charts athleticism. He's got the pedigree. He's a very good player. He's developing now.
Special teams player too. Very good on special teams, which is important. At that size, you don't see that very often.
Yeah. And now he's on an offense that projects to be better this year.
This is good.
So
I like this.
Dynasty, I've got him on a ton of teams, and he is my most rostered underdog guy right now.
This is going to save you. This is going to save you an underdog. All these Deshaun Watson stacks with DPJ and Elijah Moore, it's going to save you, my friend. It's the ripcord you need. We just have some breaking news, by the way. This is live update, breaking news. It's not good. It's not good. Treylon Burks has been carted off on the bed, back seat, not front seat. Terrace Marshall, front seat, good. Treylon Burks, back seat, bad. Hyperextended knee on a big-time downfield catch.
Yeah, I saw it, 70-yard touchdown, and then he went down after that.
Not good. Not good.
I don't really have a knee-jerk reaction to this one. It sucks. You hate injuries. It's all sunshine and rainbows in the offseason, and we're projecting everything, and then camp starts, and we remember injuries happen, and guess what? When week 1 starts, the injuries are going to hit us even harder.
Nick Westbrook-Akine could be starting. That's a thing. And just like we talked about with Khalif Raymond in 3 receiver sets, now it's Nick Westbrook-Akine. And I hate my life. Give us a bold prediction.
I mean, you want one about the Titans and this injury, or just in general?
Any bold prediction. We're trying to move on from bad news. It was obligatory. It's in the chat. I can't not announce it. We're live. We need to talk about it. But you need to give me a bold prediction for the NFL season about any team you want, about anything you want, any player, anything. Talk to me.
So this is why I wanted to shelf the Marquise Brown conversation. I've been beating the drum for this guy all season. And my bold prediction is that Marquise Brown will be on more league-winning rosters than any other player this year. How's that for spicy? And
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible. We're back. We're back. We're not doing the end screen. He did the thing. That very rare. It's only happened 1 or 2 times where he paused as if he knows that we're going out on a bold stance, a crescendo. He gave me the nice, long, juicy pause. I went to the end screen. I'm my own video producer, and I run the board as we talked about before. And then he wanted to follow up with a reason. I wanted the reason. I didn't think he was going to give me a reason. I went to the end screen. Turns out he has a reason. I turned the end screen off. We're back.
We are back. Marquise Brown was a ticking time bomb the whole time that he was on the Baltimore Ravens. Like we knew. We looked at the route run metrics and all this stuff, and he was just hamstrung by this terrible Greg Roman offense. And then he finally goes to a pass-heavy offense last year. And Matt, I'm sure you saw it, what Marquise Brown did to start last year when there was no DeAndre Hopkins on the Arizona Cardinals. He was the unquestioned wide receiver 1. And over that time, he was pacing for 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 5 in PPR scoring behind only Stephon Diggs, Cooper Krupp, Justin Jefferson, and Tyreek Hill. So now, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is out of the picture. He's probably going to be doing huge things in Tennessee if Treylon Burks has to miss any time. But Marquise Brown is the unquestioned wide receiver 1. And you are able to draft him right now at a severe discount. I mean, Marquise Brown, you can draft him as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. If you're going super wide receiver heavy, you can get him as your wide receiver 5. And I don't care if Marquise Brown puts up zeros every single week for the first half of the season. I am drafting Marquise Brown solely so he can be that late season hammer at the end of the year when Kyler Murray does return. And Kyler Murray loves Marquise Brown. They've got that connection going back to their time together in college. We saw it on a small sample size last year. I think Marquise Brown steps right back into the role we saw to start the season last year, where he's pulling almost 11 targets per game, putting up nearly 100 yards per game, scoring a touchdown every single other week. I am all in on Marquise Brown, and I think that he is going to be that guy that people are scared off because of the Kyler Murray injury, and he's going to be that late season hammer.
And you're wrong. Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.